아이씨 뭐 반등 나오면 반등도 못해 이렇게. 이제 300틱 움직였는데. 헐. 참. 이제 아래로 60틱이냐 위로 60틱이냐. 아이고 씨. 와 그지 같네 진짜. 씨. 혼자만 이렇게 또 난리야 아래로. 그쵸 맞아요. 컷은 속쓰리더라도 컷은 내줄 땐 내줘야 돼요. 이게 이렇게 되면 19,100 밑으로 간다면 또 19,000도 위험해질 수 있어서. 아이 진짜 에이씨. 뭐 지지를 이렇게 못해줘 MBC님. 아 그러게 MBC님 왜 어제 같은 날은 또 뭐 같이 못하고 또 오늘은 이러네. 네 MBC님. 네 아이씨 안타깝네. 야금 내려오는 게 별론데. 내려갈 때 내려가더라도 한번 좀 반등도 시원하게 좀 한번 좀 나와 주든가. 그러게요. 이거 완전 오늘은 원웨이로 그냥. 음, 맞아요. 움직임이 활발하고 막 크게 움직이면은 차라리 막 쉽게 또 복수도 하고 그러는데 이게 참 쉽지 않아요. 움직임이 찔끔찔끔. 네, 맞아요. 19,000 초반. 이제 거기까지 가면 이제 19,000도 위험해지니까 우리는 컷을 그 전에 150에다가 걸어놨어요. 혹시라도 이게 19,000도 훼손될 수 있으니까. 그렇게 되면 아주 골치 아파지죠. 해나님, 국산. 자, 반등도 좀 세게 한번 나와가지고 그런 맛이 있어야 되는데 꾸역꾸역 내려가면서 반등도 뭐 별로. 너무 아래에서 논다. 250 위로 올라가서 250 정도에서 박스를 치든가 그렇게 했으면 좋겠구만. 이게 너무 아래인데. 이야, 골드는 오늘 아침에 아까 항생 출발할 때 그때부터 해서 300틱이 내려왔어요. 아, 200틱이구나, 200틱. 200틱이 내려왔어. 어머타님 컷 내줬어요, 그래서? 네, 어머타님, 그러시죠. 자, 12시, 이제 조금 있으면 12시 되는데 12시 10분까지 보고, 아, 한 개야. 그건 뭐 이따가 뭐 오후장에 뭐 다른 걸로 또 충분히 찾아올 수 있는 거죠. 이제 문제는 우리가 컷이 나가면 이게 좀 한 400만 원 정도 되니까 복수 해오기가 좀 한 번에 해오기가 좀 쉽지 않죠. 악재, 글쎄요. 악재라고 보기에는 뭐 300틱 조금 넘게 움직였는데 그 정도로 악재라고 볼 수는 없고, 다만 원웨이가 나와서 좀 그런데 악재라면 막 쏟아졌어야죠. 열등이 넘었고. 52로 빨리 빠르게 빠르게. 뭐 이렇게 뜸을 들이노. 52로 가서 딱 부딪히지 말고 300에서 350까지 가서 마무리가 딱 되면 좋겠네. 그래, 빨리 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 52로. 야, 여기 40에서 50 사이, 여기가 부딪히지 말아야 되는데 여기서. 세게 좀 틀어줘야지. 좀 세게 뚫어줘야 되는데. 그래, 국선 잘 가고. 오, 51호? 여기 부딪히면 안 된다. 여기서 부딪히면은 좀 희망이. 씨, 머리 맞지 말고 뚫어라. 자, 시동 걸렸어. 가자. 밟아라. 아, 이 거지 같은 오랑캐들, 이씨. 기껏 시동 걸어놓고는 뭐 하는 거야? 헐, 안 되네. 60에 분할 청산합니다. 60에 두 개
그래도 좋죠.
청산하고, 그러면 10틱 정도. 아, 여기 시계 못 넘네. 아유. 어우. 음. '아, 여기를 뭐 딛고 서지를 못하네.' 우와. 이러면은 힘 빠지는데. 10시 12시 10분도 넘었고. 국선도 꺾이네 또. 아, 오랑캐가 이렇지 뭐. 와, 여기를 못 넣네요. 이거는 못 넣네. 컷 내주죠. 220에 컷 220에 컷 내주겠습니다. 아이씨, 어제 먹은 거 토해낸다고 생각하고 220에 컷 내주고 시마이. 아이씨, 여기서 뚫고 갔어야 되는데 여기서 다시 밀리면은
매도
컷.
체결.
이씨, 180만 원이나 되네. 뭐야? 180만 원이나 되네. 수수료까지 190만 원이네. 아씨, 크네. 이틀 번 거 토해냈네. 뭐 어쩔 수 없죠. 손실 날 땐 내줘야지. 아이 참네. 여기서 못 올라가서 여기를 뚫고 좀 빠르게 올라갔어야 되는데 여기서 힘이 완전 딸려요. 부딪혔어. 그 260의 분할로 1차 청산대기를 했는데 그것도 못 오고 매틱 차이로 안 왔어요. 그러고 나서는 다시 또 밑으로 가고. 자, 뭐 컷을 안 내준 분들은 어디까지 뭐 좀 잘 지키고 가시다가 가서 좀 수익으로 잘 나오시면 좋겠는데, 어쨌든 제 거는 다시 밀리면서 우리 추가 진입한 자리 거기서 컷을 내줬어요. 그래서 이런 뭐 이 정도 컷이야 뭐 언제든지 또 찾아오면 되니까. 네, 네네, 저도 이만 가보겠습니다. 네, 예지님, 네, 감사합니다. 파라님, 네, 미시님, 내일 봬요. 네, 알겠습니다. 내일 복수해오는 걸로 하시죠. 네, 자, 여러분 수고만 많으셨네. 아이고, 네, 우리 오늘 손실난 건 내일 또 다 찾아오도록 하고, 오후장은 김과장의 오늘 해외 선물 시간 있죠? 그 시간에 또 들어오시고, 오늘 또 친절한 군자씨 아카데미 교육 있는 날이죠? 네, 그때 또 야간에 들어오셔서 수익 내시길 바랍니다. 네, 수홍님, 준리님, 감사합니다. 내일 봬요. 감사합니다.
You know, I think most people think, Jay, everyone else is gonna die. I'll get around to being happy. I'll get around to my dreams. And then it's another day, and they keep it in the distance. You only understand the power of one day when you're threatened with never having another one.
The best-selling author and host.
The #1 health and wellness podcast.
On Purpose with Jay Shetty.
This quote by Thomas Edison said, "When you feel you've exhausted all options, remember this, you haven't."
I love that.
That's the power of
That is
one
the
more.
power of one more.
And so I have lived this book in my life. Like I have lived this mindset, and it has changed my life because I've always been just one step away, one habit away, one mindset away from this amazing life that I'm grateful and blessed to live.
Well, that's the truth, right? You're right. And I think the great lie in life is that, some scriptures say, well, where there's no vision, the people will perish. Whatever your scriptures are. Really, do you have no vision? If you ask the average person, you want to be happy or sad? What's your vision? They'd say, I want to be happy. You want to be rich or poor? Most people say, I'd like to be rich. Do you want to contribute or make no difference in the world? I want to contribute. Do you want beautiful memories or no memories? I want memories. So there's a vision. Our issue is depth perception. We think it's further away than it is. And because we think it's so far away, Jay, we create patterns and behaviors in our life that perpetually keep it there.
Ooh.
And that's what we do in our life. But what if that's the great lie of life? And what if the truth is that you're one relationship away, one meeting away, one conversation, one podcast, one interview, one new thought, one new emotion, one new tactic or strategy away from completely changing the trajectory of your life. And everyone that you and I know that we both work with, that we're blessed to work with in our lives, the truth is it was one decision, one meeting, one extra rep, one more phone call, one thing they did that changed their trajectory. Then the question then becomes, how do I do it? And so the strategies are in the book, but conceptually, that's 100% how you change your life.
Yeah, and you're so right. I was thinking about this morning. Last year, I had a double hernia surgery on the front. So I couldn't walk for about a month. And when I say I couldn't walk, I mean like I literally couldn't move.
Oh my gosh.
It was like I felt like I was teaching myself to walk again. Like that's how it felt. It's really interesting what you just said about how we perpetually push it far away. I would wake up every morning and my mind or my initial mindset was like, it will be gone today.
Yeah.
It must have gone today. Like today it will be fully healed. I'll be fine today. And I would wake up and I wouldn't be. And I would feel like healing was so far away.
Yes.
It would be like 80% away that I was missing out on the 1% change since yesterday.
You got it.
Since yesterday, I made a 1% change. I wasn't feeling the same pain in my nerves. I was able to be flexible by 1% more.
Yes.
And I was missing out on all of that because I was so obsessed with how far I was.
That's the journey. And
from
the
complete
thing,
healing.
and what happens is when you live with an expectation that these one mores exist, the reticular activating system in your mind filters them into your awareness. I call it the matrix in the second chapter of the book. When you wake up believing, hey, I'm one decision away, I'm one meeting away, one relationship away, that's not hokey. Your mind begins to filter the people, places, and things into your awareness. You develop something called sensory acuity. You hear conversations you weren't hearing. We've all had that experience where we're on an airplane. I can't stop hearing these people over here. Or you walk in a loud room, but you can hear your own name auditorily over all the other names in the room. That's because it's important to you and it matters. You see things. And so when something becomes important to you and you believe it to be true, the RAS goes to proving it for you. And where I learned this, ironically, I talk about it in the book, is my father was an alcoholic and had tried to get sober many, many times. And I'll never forget it, Jay. We were driving to a baseball game of mine. My dad started crying. I'd never seen my dad cry before. And he pulls the car over and he still isn't looking at me, but he's crying and he says, Eddie. And then he turns to me and he goes, I'm going to try to get sober. And I'll never forget this, brother. He goes, one more time.
Wow.
And I said, really, Daddy? He goes, I'm going to give it one more try. And I said to him, I said, why would this be any different this time? And he said, never said this to me before. He goes, because I love you and you deserve a father you can be proud of. And you can't be proud of me right now. And I think every great thing we do in life is one away, but it's also born from love. To talk about your book, when you love people or you love something so deeply, if that love is greater than what the obstacles might be, now you got a shot to do it. Then my dad gets sober. He comes home from rehab. I say, Daddy, are you never going to drink again? And he said, I can't promise you that. I can promise you I'm not going to drink for one more day at a time.
Wow. Wow.
And he lasted the rest of his life stacking those one more days up. And so I know the power of one more. And Jay, the other thing, I also know humans can change. I watched my hero do it. I watched my dad live my first 15 years. Saw him in a lot of fights.
Wow.
A lot of lying, a lot of difficult times. And then I saw this man transform. And in life, we're most qualified to help the person we used to be. Mm-hmm. And what we think in life, and I hope everybody gets this, we think the things we're most ashamed of, embarrassed by, our divorce, our bankruptcy, or maybe we've just always been average and ordinary. This disqualifies me from being successful and happy. What if that's not true? What if the hardest things of your life are the very things that qualify you? I'll give you an example. You know how my dad got sober? Somebody helped him. My dad was going to take his life or lose his family, and I didn't know who it was till months ago. Some precious human being whom I didn't know. In my dad's darkest hour of his life, Jay said, I'll help you. I'll help you. Little did that person know, I'd be his son, and I'd help millions of people, and I'd be on Jay Shetty's show, and we both help millions of people. And the more ironic thing that this person helped my dad is what qualified them to help my dad. They were a drunk. They were an alcoholic. They at one time were a drug addict. They at one time were lying and stealing and living in the shadows. The very thing that person probably figured, that disqualifies me from having a successful life, was the one thing that did qualify them to help my dad. So if you're listening to this and you've had something you're ashamed of, or a failure or a setback, you're most qualified to help the people you used to be. Yeah. And that person, that alcoholism they suffered with their drug addiction, helped my dad live those one more days forever.
That is the best explanation I've heard of how pain turns into purpose.
That's right.
The thing that brought you down, that broke you down, that made you feel like you were losing everything.
That's right.
Gave you back everything when you used that to serve the people that were struggling with it.
And then there's a purpose. And you know, if you can survive the temporary pain in your life, and all pain is temporary. I watched my father pass away last year. He was in tremendous pain. Even our bodies are temporary. Only our souls are permanent. Mm-hmm. If you can survive the temporary, on the other side of temporary pain, you meet another version of yourself, another insight about yourself. And that's why it's so important to grow as a person, because the more we grow and become a new person, we can help those that used to be like us. Mm-hmm. And that's why you and I are so addicted to growing and learning, and we're curious, because if you used to be a broken person and you no longer are quite as broken, you can help broken people. Yeah. If you used to be broke financially and you no longer are, you can help people. Whatever you do for a living, at one time you didn't know about it, and now you do. You can help those who need to know about it. And so you're immensely qualified if you understand the power of doing one more.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Tell me about, so let's say, and you probably come up against this all the time. Sure. A lot of the people say, okay, I'm going to practice that. I'm with you, Ed. Mm-hmm. I love you and Jay. I'm listening, and I go, yes, I'm going to practice the power of one more. Mm-hmm. Now, what I find, and this is why you're so great at teaching this, because you're not teaching it as a gimmick, a glitch, or like a little affirmation. This is like real, it makes sense. Like, it works. Mm-hmm. People get so tied to the result that when they try it the next day and the sales meeting doesn't go their way, or the pitch doesn't go their way, they go, it doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Why didn't it work? And how should we respond when we fail or get rejected the next day?
Well, it didn't work because you're so attached to the outcome. I coach a lot of athletes. I know you do as well. And one of the things that's a really nuanced thing in life, it's great to have goals. You should have goals. I want to do this or that. But in the moment of execution, you have to separate from outcome in the moment that you're executing and just be present and exist. I talk about this in the book. Here's what I would say. If you're going to win long term, 95% of people have an operating system in their mind where they operate out of history and memory.
I like that.
And about 5% of humans operate out of vision and imagination. So the reason we're so much happier, I believe, when we're children is we have no history and memory. So we operate out of imagination and dreams and vision. But at some age, some people it's 5 years old, some it's 8, some it's 18, some it's 28. They create a history, and that history then becomes the operating system. So even if they take on a new behavior or tactic, they're operating out of a pattern of thought and belief that's historic and memory-based. And so the number one thing I would say is begin to operate out of your imagination again, out of your vision again. Create from that place. If you create from that place, Now you're not tied to the result in that moment. You're giving yourself space to imagine and create something new in your life.
That I've never heard that in that language, man. That is so powerful.
Thank you.
You're so right about as kids how we don't have any memory or history, so we don't have any blocks, we don't have any
You
limits.
don't. And begin to listen to the people around you. People say, hey, you're the product of who you hang around. How do I know if they serve me or not? Here's one way to just deduce this, because they could be beautiful people who care about you, and they might even support you. But when you're with them, what are you ever have those friends you're with them, you're like, you remember when, you remember that party, remember that thing?
Yeah.
And if your friends are constantly bringing you to the filtration system of memory and history all the time, think this through. How often are those friends saying, hey, what are you working on now? Yeah. Where are you going? What's your vision? What do you want to create? Yeah. And maybe that sounds hokey, but you and I have both our friends have the most amazing histories, and you can't get them to talk about them.
No.
You have to work, because what are they still doing?
Yeah.
They're talking about now and where they're going.
Yeah.
Their viewpoint in their life is being present and having a vision for the future.
Yeah.
A formula for misery, a formula for lack of creativity, lack of productivity is constantly being history and memory.
Yeah.
Even if it's good, it doesn't serve us. And for most of us, it's not good. And we keep living from it or trying to move away from it. Create a new future. Don't move away from the past. Create a brilliant, imaginative, curious, vibrant vision for your life.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we're always trying to create the same past.
Yes.
As opposed to a new future.
A new future.
And I find that what's really interesting about that, all the studies show that nostalgia makes us believe that the past was more phenomenal than it actually was. If you remember that party you went to at college, it's better in your memory than it actually was. If you actually could have gone back and remembered how you felt hungover and what you broke a bone or whatever happened, but now in your memory, it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Right? So our memory also is slightly warped of the past.
No question.
It can make things feel much better or much worse sometimes.
No question.
But what's really coming out for me right now is this idea that it's something you said a couple of moments ago, and it sparked a thought for me. I remember the story that Vanessa Bryant told about Kobe Bryant after he passed away. I was fortunate enough to interview him around 3 months before his tragic passing. And she told this story, and she said that Kobe would play through every injury. He would play through every pain. He would play through everything, even when the doctors and his coaches would say, stop playing. And she asked him, she said once, why he still plays, right? Again, going back to our curiosity, not assuming you know your partner. She asked him, why do you still play? And this is just her and him. There's no cameras, she's telling this story, but at the time it was just them two. He said it's because there's someone who's paid for a ticket today. They saved up. And this is the only time they're ever going to be able to come. Maybe maybe a dad's brought his kid. Maybe someone's come to the game. They're a lifelong fan, and they came today. And today's the only day they're going to get to see me. And if I say I'm injured, they won't get to see me. So I'm going to play so that person,
that one person,
gets to see me play, and then he goes and wins.
Yes,
and it's like. That's love.
That's
right?
love.
That's what you were saying.
Love for something is in the present moment also, right? Wow. Love is not just for the past. And it's funny how important one day is, man. When my dad got sick, my dad got cancer. When he first got sick, he goes, hey, my dad was a dude. He goes, look, I'll fight this one time. Okay, I'll do your little chemo and your surgery, but I'm not going to pour poison into my body. I'm not going to lose my hair. I'm not going to deteriorate. I'll give this thing a shot once. If it doesn't work, I'm out. That led to 8 years of him fighting it.
Wow.
Chemo, radiation, proton therapy, surgery, chemo, experimental chemo. And he did lose his hair and he was in pain. And I'd say to my dad, Dad, you're suffering so much. You said you wouldn't suffer. He said, no, Eddie, I'm in pain, but I'm not suffering. I choose not to suffer. And I'm not suffering because I get to see my grandkids again. And I said, Dad, why are you doing this? And he said, you only understand the power of one day when you're threatened with never having another one. I'll do anything for one more day. Get to be with you one more time. Give your mom a kiss one more time. Maybe I'll see one of my granddaughters get married. And he goes, I'll do anything for one more day. The beautiful thing is I was actually with Kobe a week before he passed away. We were in the same gym. Our daughters played volleyball. And ironically that day, I watched Kobe walk out of the gym. There was only a couple dads left. It was late at night. He stayed and I stayed. And he had his youngest daughter in his arm and he was rubbing his other daughter's back. And I remember taking note of it because I was with Bella at the other end of the gym. And I remember thinking, I don't hug Bella enough. I need to hug. No joke, bro. It's in the book. I went, I got to hug Bella one more time every day. Not just once a day, plus one more time every day. My daughter's going to get extra hugs because Kobe does that. What if I could have said to Kobe when he got in his car, Kobe, you have one more week, brother. Tell those that you love them. Get it right. Whoever matters to you, make it right. Call your dad, make it right. Call your mom, call your family. What if the day before you could have said, Kobe, you have one day left? And my dad, same thing. I was with my dad when he had 1 day left. I was with my dad when he had 1 hour left. I was with my dad when he had one breath left. And when we begin to think of our life that way, the power of right now and having one more moment and one more minute is so beautiful. It's so blessed. It's so big. It's so amazing. Why would we spend that minute in history? Why would we spend that minute in the past when we could be fully present in creating the future? And so, I think most people think, Jay, everyone else is going to die. I think they just, I'm not going to die. Or they go, I'll get around to being happy. I'll get around to making my masterpiece of my life. I'll get around to my dreams. I'm going to get around to fixing this relationship that's broken. I'm going to get around to feeling those emotions. And then it's another day and another day. And they keep it in the distance until there are no more days. And I don't care if you're 18 years old listening to this, 28 or 48. We don't know if we have one more day or 100 more days or 1,000 more days. But we know this, there'll eventually be a time where we don't have any more days. And so why would we spend the ones that are coming looking at the past? And so my dad really taught me those lessons in watching him pass away. And that's why I have a whole thing in there of how to get 21 days a week, run mini days. I get 21 days a week. We still measure time, bro, like it's 1900. Think about 1900. Yeah. If I wanted to get you a note, I'd have to write a letter out, stick it on the back of a horse's butt in 1850. 30 days later, you get it. That was a 24-hour day. Now I can text you in 2 seconds. We measure time the same way. Yeah. So I teach you how to change your time so that you can make that day its maximum bliss, its maximum productivity.
What's one more that you're working on right now?
Right now, it's an interesting season of my life. I have a TV show that I did with NBC that's called Change that I think is, has a chance of getting picked up. But my one more that I'm working on right now for me and my life is my peace. And so there's this guy, Jay Shetty, that's a friend of mine that introduced me and my family to meditation. And I'm giving myself the gift I don't just do it in the morning now. I've given myself the gift of one more time every single day of just emptying my mind and trying to be fully present. And it's been work for me. I've got that busy type of a mind, but I have found that my peace in my life, most of us, Jay, have all these goals of things we want to do, and they're wonderful. And I believe in doing that. I think standards are more important than goals because, and I teach you in this in the book, how to set the standards that'll get those goals. But we really don't want the jet. We don't want the hit song. We don't want the amazing relationship. We don't want the $1 million. We want how we think it'll make us feel. And what if we began to become more intentional and outcome oriented about the things we feel in our life? And it took me a while, but now that I'm older, when I feel strong, when I feel blissful, when I feel peaceful, is when I produce the physical things that I want, not the other way around. Oof. And so my one mores are more emotional focus. Most of us, then I'll come up for air here, have an emotional home. There's 3 or 4 or 5 emotions we experience on a regular basis. I write about it in the book. And no matter what happens, we find a way, even if they don't serve us, to get those emotions. If your emotional home is fear, anxiety, worry, depression, anger, you find a way every week to get that emotion. But what if that emotional home could become bliss and peace and joy and creativity and ecstasy? And so I'm working on one more beautiful emotion for my emotional home, and for me, it's peace.
I love that. I love that answer, man. It's good to hear about what you've been saying. Like, we're not living in the past, and you're like in the present. But to have you answer that question, that peace is your presence. Like, that's what you're looking for.
Right
like,
now.
that's the present. And it shows that you're using this, like it works. You're doing it time and time again. And I love what you said. It moves from the physical things into the subtle, into the emotional, into the deeper. I think that's so profound. What was that one more that if you didn't do it, you wouldn't be here today? What was one of those ones that like that was the one that convinced me, apart from obviously your father, that you were like, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be Ed Milet today. I wouldn't be Max Out Life.
The first business I built was a financial business, and I had some success, Jay, like a lot of people do in life. And then it went backwards. And sometimes when you get up the flagpole just a little bit and you come back down, that's an emotional difficulty. It could be a relationship that was good that's gone, or maybe it saved some money, it's gone. Maybe you lost a bunch of weight and got fit and you gained it back. For me, it was my business. And I called my dad. He was a pretty wise guy now that he was sober. And because I could tell you, man, I'd do one more rep in the gym. I haven't done 10 reps on a bench press in 30 years. I've done 10 plus one more a lot, though. I haven't done 45 minutes on a treadmill, but I've done 45 plus one more minute. 10 contacts a day? Never. 10 plus one more. But the biggest one more was actually something else. I called my dad and I said, hey, Dad, it's not going. The business is crashing. And I'm running out of money. Our power was turned off. Our water was turned off, Jay. I had to take my wife every morning. We'd lost our house. We're living in an apartment now. Then the water got turned off. You can't cook. You can't bathe. There was a apartment building. We had an outdoor shower at the swimming pool. And we were newlyweds. And I'd have to get up every morning, walk down there, and I'd hold a towel up while my wife took her shower every day outdoors and brushed her teeth. And then she'd switch and hold the towel up for me. And I'd walk back up to the apartment, and I was so emasculated, so ashamed, so embarrassed. And I was living a nightmare, selling a dream to everybody every day. We can do this. A lot of entrepreneurs or people can relate in their life. And anyway, I called my dad that night and I said, I think I need to pack it in. I need to go get a job and this success thing is not... It's not for people like us. And my dad goes, Eddie, you don't have to decide you're never going to quit. He goes, just don't quit for one more day. See how you feel tomorrow. I go, Dad, he goes, just don't do it for one more day. And I got up the next day and I still wanted to quit, but not quite as much. And then I went one more day. And I found myself about 30 days later, I didn't want to quit anymore. And thank God the one more I did was I went one more day without quitting. And I'm so grateful I didn't quit on my dream.
Oh, Ed, wow, that is like, oh my gosh, man. Like, everything you're just dropping right now, I'm just like, I hope everyone is taking notes. If you haven't been taking notes, I want you to take a screenshot right now of where we're at right now, because that's what you're going to have to listen to again. So take a screenshot, share it, tell everyone to go to this segment, listen to that over again, because I think what I'm hearing, is that this is a lifestyle. Like, this is a mindset. It's a lifestyle. It's an everyday, every moment way to live. This isn't just in the big business you're building. This is me telling my wife I love her one more time. This is me making sure I message my mom one more time. It's me making sure that when I'm sitting here with you, I'm always going to have to ask you one more question because you keep giving so much. No, but you keep giving so. Well, that's what you just said. It will never end. Mm-hmm. I think if people feel like they tried a lot and then they start building up resentment and like pain and bitterness towards that path. And a lot of people also that I know, they just think that there are some people who are meant to be.
I agree with this.
And then there are some people that are not meant to be.
That's correct.
And they carry that with them. And it comes from this like, oh yeah, you were meant to be this, or that person was meant to have it. But for me, this is where, and I heard that kind of come up in what you were saying to your dad, like, it doesn't happen to people like us. How does this principle apply to someone who's in that
Brother,
space?
best question ever. Because I grew up with you have an alcoholic dad or a drug addict, or maybe you come from divorce, or maybe your parents just didn't love you enough, whatever it was, didn't tell you they loved you enough. It's hard to have self-confidence. I was a little guy, I got bullied in school, and and even at this age now, bro, I if I'm being completely honest, self-confidence, we all teach that it's, part of keeping the promises you make to yourself. But what if you raise the standard a little higher? You keep the promises you make to yourself, plus one more. Because for me, self-confidence didn't come easy. I think in life, ultimately you're going to get what you believe you deserve. And if you're wired like me, I didn't think I deserved a lot. I didn't even have a dad who could stop drinking, right? I wasn't 6'4". I don't have an incredibly high IQ. There's nothing really that impressive about me, nor were people very impressed with me most of my life. So that was my pattern. That was my history. That was my memory. And so I could wait around until I developed tremendous self-confidence, or I could begin to do things every day that were small. They're not major. And over time, when I did those one more calls, that one more meeting, that one more book I read, that one more podcast, not only am I doing more reps, so the likelihood of me being successful is bigger, but I started to convince myself I'm doing things other people aren't willing to do. Maybe I deserve things other people aren't going to get. And slowly but surely, I started to convince myself I did deserve it based on what I was doing, not necessarily the caliber of my talent.
Yeah.
And that was the difference.
Yeah, there's a thought I've been having recently, and it's that comfort creates self-care, but discomfort creates self-respect.
Ooh, boy, I love
right?
that.
Like, it's what
love
you're
that.
saying.
I love
that.
that.
The one more discomfort every day,
Yes.
that's where self-respect comes from.
Yes.
You don't...
Great term.
You don't start to trust yourself or build self-esteem or believe in yourself because you just say it to yourself.
Amen.
It's coming what you just said. You go out there and take one more meeting and see what you learn. You go out there and take one more risk, one more discomfort.
And I guarantee you, if you have a successful or happy friend, how you determine that, and you ask them this, they'd tell you that we're right.
Yeah.
They would tell you, gosh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's right. And the difference between winning and losing, happiness and sadness, is so small, it's almost scary to talk about. But the good news is I think I kind of know what it is, and it's this one more.
Absolutely. The people that I know that are the most successful and happy have more uncomfortable conversations.
Agreed.
They have more uncomfortable days. They have more discomfort in their lives.
Yes, totally agree with that.
But selected discomfort. But one of the other things that I'm asking from now, I'm like going into like the people that I know that I'm thinking about, I can see their faces and I want them to know that I'm asking for them. A lot of the time, one more in the wrong direction
That's right.
can also be really misguiding. Sometimes people, and I know you're a person of faith too, and so we can touch on this. Sometimes we're climbing the mountain and we keep doing one more, but we're actually going further away from who we are, who we want to be, our faith, our partners, right? We know people who've built multi-billion-dollar companies but lost their kids.
That's right.
Or they've become famous and rich, but their partner cheated on them, or like
We
really
know a lot
painful
of those.
stuff. And you know people who didn't do all of that, and that's happened too.
Sure.
Like it's both ways. How does one use one more and make sure it's in the right direction?
Such a great question. I'm doing this now regularly because I've made some of those mistakes and what I do is I check in with myself one more time, meaning it's important to ask yourself, what matters to me now? See, if we had this conversation 20 years ago, the things that mattered to me then are so different than what matter to me now. But a lot of us keep operating out of what used to. Maybe you've achieved or are pursuing a dream, and it's really, truly no longer your dream. It's no longer your dream. It's when I was young, listen, if we were going to do a podcast, you say, hey, I need you on the show. People are going to love you. You're going to get recognition. You're going to get all this acknowledgement. And that would have been my hot button, my need. I believe in the 6 human needs. My need was significance and recognition. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful. And so that's the button to get me to move would be significance, recognition. Well, I've been blessed the last 30 years or so of my life to have a beautiful abundance of significance and recognition. It's no longer what fills me. Now you get me to do an interview, you go, hey, I really think we could help some people. My big button in my life now is contribution. There was another stage in my life, it's still there, but hey, if you go there, you'll grow. I still want to grow, but I know me now. Right now, I'm in a season of my life that's contribution. It's giving. It's what fills my heart. And I think it's checking in with yourself one more time. What matters to me now? What do I want now? What's important to me now? What season? Maybe you're in a season where you need to rest. Maybe your spirit and everything about you is telling you, hey, it's time to feed you again. It's time to recharge. If that's the season, then answer that call. Don't play out of a past playbook. And so for me, that's the season I'm in now. And I'm sure that in 5 or 8 more years, there'll be something else. But I regularly, on a monthly basis, you recommend it in your book so beautifully about your relationship, checking in. You have these strategies you teach about weekly and monthly and quarterly and yearly with your partner of checking in with them. I also recommend you check in with yourself and what matters to you now. And so for me, it's a matter of checking in now so that I don't lose my family in the pursuit of my business or lose me.
Yeah.
Lose me. Who am I anymore? And I've had times where I'm like, this doesn't feel like me anymore.
Yeah.
And I had at least the ability to at least acknowledge that and make a change.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up seasons because I feel like no one and on planet Earth, we don't have the power to change the season.
Yeah.
But you have the power to live the season well.
That's right.
You can either be right now it's been raining, right?
Yeah.
Wherever
Where
we
we
are. It's been like pouring down with rain. There's all this effort. You could carry an umbrella. Well, you can tell how I'm dressed.
Right.
I'm definitely not dressed in my usual gear.
Right.
Because I'm dressed for the rain. I'm prepared.
Yes.
Because that's all I can do. I can't make the rain switch off. I can't stop it, right? Like I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I love hearing that you're just learning how to thrive in the season. And so if your season's telling you to rest, you can't force the season. And you have to live it through. You have to experience it.
I think you have to remember one thing, man. I think it's just easy as a person to forget this. And I just would love to say this because you have such an amazing reach. Each of you and I included, we were born to do something great with our life. We were born to do something great with our life. And it's important to check in from time to time of what that current great thing is. And sometimes we think it's the big things. It's the people that are on both our shows. They've made this big movie. They've got this big song. They're this big thing. Who's greater? The man who helped my dad get sober? Or the fact that maybe I've helped some people because my dad got sober? That one act was greatness in his life. That kind moment with another person that says, I can help you. Let me connect with you. And so don't discount your own greatness, your own call to do something great. And it doesn't have to be a script or a play or a book or a speech or on social media. It's just doing something great, and you matter. I don't mean this hokey. I'm telling you the truth about you. You matter. You were born to do something awesome with your life. Your family's supposed to do something great as a family. And maybe it's just checking in and reminding yourself of that and then asking yourself, what is that thing right now in my life? And so I just think that reminder is so important that, it's great to voyeuristically look in on successful people or what we think are successful people. It's also important to have the camera turn back on you and go, you matter. You matter. You are great. And that's probably the most important thing we'd say today.
Oh, gosh, man. Yeah. And one thing you just clarified beautifully is that great doesn't have to be big.
No.
And big doesn't mean great, right? And I think we're so obsessed today.
We are.
In that to do something great, it has to be big, it has to be bold. When I think about myself, honestly, Ed, and I can say this to you because I think in these sessions and when we spend time together, you've heard my heart. I was one of those people who actually never believed I could do any of the stuff I've done. I never set out when I started and I was like, one day I'm going to be... I didn't have any of that. That's not how I'm wired. I was wired in I want to serve. Yeah. I'm going to serve whoever comes.
Yes.
Whether it's 5 people, 10 people, I'm happy. Yep. I'll serve them. And as I started to do that, I got more confidence. Okay, now I want to serve larger groups. Okay, let me serve them. Yes. And then it was and I never believed at any point that there were these arbitrary, abstract goals of number one this. Those weren't how I set out. And so when I'm listening to you speak, I hope someone's out there thinking, Jay and Ed, I'm like you guys, where it's I don't vibe with all that motivation, I just vibe with the fact that I want to have a great impact, like the person that helped your father.
Yeah, and you know what we've both found in our life too, just to give you insight from someone called me seasoned today. This is that the universe or God really prepares you to step into the next room when you step in with some faith. And so maybe it does start with 5 or 6 people, and maybe that's enough, but perhaps in that space you're in, there'll be a little door open. And if you step into that one, you'll find, I think we think, I have to have it all figured out. Yeah. Wozniak's a good buddy of mine who started Apple. They didn't. They were a board company. They didn't know they'd be doing this someday. They stepped into the next space. And one thing I think we also want is an immediate result. And I talk about this in the book. Maybe this would be last little thing I'll share with you, but I went to a birthday party as I was writing the book, and it was for a young boy, and they had a piñata. We've all been to especially living in California, you know, the piñata. And so what they did is they took each of these little guys, they blindfolded them and spun them around, and they're all dizzy and they're swinging, and they're not even near the piñata. That's life. A lot of times you feel like, man, I'm blind. I don't even know where I'm swinging right now, but I'm swinging. And so each kid hit the piñata, and the candy didn't come out. And so they take the blindfold off. That kid got tired. The next little boy came up, spun him around. So like 7 of them hit this piñata. No candy came out. The last boy, the smallest boy, the youngest boy there, they throw the blindfold on him. They spin him around. He's swinging too. That's life. You just sort of swinging, right? They finally point him at the piñata. He hits the piñata just once. Bam. All the candy comes out. And all the kids jump on and celebrate. And I'm watching that and I'm going, now who broke the piñata? Was it the last shot? Or was it the cumulative blows of each of the shots on the piñata? Well, we all know the answer. It was the cumulative shots. Life's a lot like that, man. That we're taking shots, but we don't see any physical progress. But every one more we're doing is compound pounding progress. And in life, you have to be willing to buy into what is invisible progress. Most people quit on their dream, quit on their vision before the candy comes out. And what you and I didn't do is quit. We just kept swinging. And eventually the candy comes out. The candy could be your bliss, your joy, your financial success, your notoriety, your contribution. But most people are hitting the piñata of their life and there's no evidence it's working. But the truth is there's a compound pounding effect in life that if you keep hitting your life's piñata, if you'll stick around, there'll be some candy come out.
The power of one more, everyone. Ed Milet. Go and grab this book if you haven't already. It's going to be a life changer. I mean, you can just feel the energy coming off this human being. Honestly, I want you to go read this book. I want you to go listen to the podcast if you don't already. The first book was called Max Out Your Life as well, the Max Out podcast. Ed, you are just, your energy is infectious. I don't know how anyone can't listen to you, read from you, hear from you, and not feel like they need to change their life. Like, you've just given me a list of number ones that I'm going to do. One more. I hope that you keep coming back on the show. I hope that we keep getting to connect offline. I hope that we get to, keep spending one more day, one more phone call, one more time together, because
So grateful for you, bro. I love you.
really grateful, man. Thank you so
man.
much.
I love you.
Thank you. Everyone grab the copy of the book. I'll put it in the link. I'll put it in the comment section in the caption. The Power of One More. This is the book. Love it, brother.
Thanks, brother.
That was
Good.
That was good.
That was good.
If you love this episode, you'll love my interview with Kobe Bryant on how to be strategic and obsessive to find your purpose. So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination. Right? We suffer twice. What you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
You talked about the fear of fear and how you had to learn to let go of your fear of fear. What does that actually mean, letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah. So I talk about how we fear the wrong things.
What do we fear?
So most of us are fearful of how our friends are reacting, what's happening on social media, and what's the random bit of news that we heard. None of it is fact-based. That's one of the biggest issues that we have.
Worry-based.
It's worry-based, and it's also imagination-based. So we become fiction writers. We've all watched too many movies. Now we start writing these beautiful movies in our head. Well, not beautiful, scary movies in our head of what may happen. So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination. Right? We suffer twice. And this is the
What
biggest...
actually happens to us,
Totally.
and then the story we continue to tell ourselves.
Totally. Now, there's this incredible study in the book that I have to talk about. So
Tell
they
me.
took monks and they took non-monks, and they
competed against each
They
other.
competed against each other, literally. So they put this plate where you experience heat. And so what happens is the non-monks touch this plate. Now, this plate heats up gradually, softly, and then at one point it gets really hot for 10 seconds and then it cools down. And so what happened is that when the non-monks touched it, the anxiety and pressure and stress in their brain just triggered straight away, even though it wasn't that hot.
It wasn't hot.
It was heating, but it wasn't hot to do anything major to you. But the anxiety and stress in imagination or in anticipation went through the roof in the non-monks. Now this is what's fascinating. When the monks touched it, they showed that it didn't feel anything as it rose, but as it got to its highest, they felt physical pain, but they showed no trigger of emotional pain because they did not assign any emotional element to that pain. So my point with that is, you can look at the news right now and you can get scared straight away and get in complete freeze mode, feeling stuck, paralyzed, whatever it is, because what you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
And you can cause sickness in yourself.
You can cause sickness
just by the
inside
story,
yourself.
not actually
the reality.
the facts of the disease hitting you or something happening physically to you.
Totally. And that story, again, can be used positively. So your story may actually be true. But if it's going to be true, now you can prepare. And that shifts you away from being scared because now you're preparing.
Yes.
And so the real
You can be confident because you prepared.
Exactly. And so we should be shifting our fear energy into preparation energy. Because what fear does is it keeps you locked there, right? We just feel stuck. I'll give you an example. Like when you were preparing for big games, when you used to play in the NFL, right? And you're playing American football against some of the biggest athletes in the world. It's like you can either sit there and be scared that you're going to play this game on the weekend, or you can prepare. And your confidence is in the preparation. So when people go, how do I feel confident right now? Are you preparing?
Are you putting the reps?
Are you putting the reps?
Yeah.
Are you building your immunity? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you
drinking lots of water?
Are you drinking lots of water? Are you taking the steps that are needed to prepare for whatever's coming? You will feel more confident that way.
Yeah. So how do we learn to let go of the fear of fear, though? Like, how do we say, okay, we're only going to allow it to hurt us when it actually hurts us and not the fear of it? Is there a process? Is there just an awareness of this, that when you're in anxiety, worry, stress, fear, you just breathe and meditate? Then what's the process of letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah, so meditation, mindfulness, powerful tools, but I'd say the process, and I want to be as tactical and strategic as we can. The thing is to get really close to that fear. So what we usually do
Embrace
is
it.
Embrace it, get close to it, get intimate with it. We
Become the bat. Sit in the bat cave.
Literally, yeah.
Embrace the fear.
Totally. We run away from fear. We like to run away and go, oh, it's not coming with me. Or what we do is we hear one thing and we define the whole understanding of our fear based on that one thing.
Yes.
So it's like someone, and I'll give you a normal example in a normal life scenario.
Yes.
Someone says to you in the office, you know that they're going to cut a few people. And you don't even check. You don't even know.
Is it real?
And now you just made it real, and now you're running with it, and you're trying to run away from it. So you're trying to avoid conversations with your boss. You're trying to avoid any conflict. You're trying to, you're just trying to avoid it. And so actually what you need to do is go, okay, let me actually discover that fear. Let me go intimate with that fear. Let me ask myself, where's that fear coming from? What am I really scared of? What am I really scared of? Am I really scared of losing my job? Am I scared of not having any money? What am I really scared of? And when you get to the root, and I call it the why ladder in the book. So it's asking yourself, what am I scared of? And then go, why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? Why am I scared of this? And when you can't ask why any longer, you've got to the answer, and that's what you have to deal with. Most of us are not dealing with what we're actually scared of. So that's how you let go. You let go by keep asking yourself. So I'll give you an example of mine. Like if I heard that, or if you hear that in your office, that people are getting cut, it's like, you just get scared and panicked. But the question is, why am I scared of that? Am I scared of that because I haven't been working hard for 6 months? Am I scared of that because I've been skipping meetings? Am I scared of that because I know my boss will probably fire me first? Or am I scared because I've been performing really well and I'm expecting a promotion? Knowing which one it is sets you up to build the path forward. Not knowing that just puts you in this panic frenzy.
I think also like doing all the things you talked about, which is discovering within yourself, being aware of it, but then also just have the conversation.
100%.
Confront it with your manager, your boss, and say, hey, listen, I heard some rumors that there might be some cuts, and I want to let you know that I'm 100% committed to doing whatever it takes to help this company grow.
Yes, 100%.
I believe in this mission more than anything. Here's what I've been doing the last 3 months, and here's what I want to continue to do. Is there anything else I can do?
Totally.
Like show them why you shouldn't get cut.
Exactly, and that's, you know how to approach that discussion when you know which side you're on, what your fear is.
I remember as a freshman playing football, I was playing Division II football in Minnesota. They usually redshirt all the freshmen. And I went into this with a big ego, thinking like, I'm gonna start, or at least I wanna play, right? So I went into it with an ego in the first place. But I also, which wasn't good, but I also went into it with some things that were good from this conversation. I told the coach straight up, like, I know you don't play freshmen, but my intention's to play. what is it going to take for me in order to get on the field? You know, do I need to get here early? Do I need to stay late? Can I sit here in the office with you after the before practice and go over game film? Whatever it was. And he told me, yeah, I need you to come in the office every single day and watch game film with me. I need to be with your receiver coach every single day beforehand and doing reps. And I just did it. And I eventually started to play my freshman year. I didn't start in the beginning, but I started to start at the end. And that for me was powerful. It's like I dressed in it because I wanted to play and I was afraid I wasn't going to play at all. And just waste a year of practicing like every other freshman would do there. That was my ego going
That's
in, like I need to play. But I was also like, I'll do whatever it takes and I'll practice and I'll confront it with conversation and say, this is my intention, this is my vision, and I'm going to do whatever it takes for you. And so I think that
That's a
in
perfect
workplace,
example.
Yeah, if you're in a workplace, you've got to be confronting it and be proactive in your conversation.
Correct. And that's a perfect example of getting close to fear rather than running away from it.
Exactly.
Spot on, man.
For me, my whole mission in the last year and moving forward, the next projects I'm working on are all about belief in yourself. I believe self-doubt is the killer of dreams. And I believe that, and you have this amazing graph in here, it's about ego versus self-esteem. How do we build self-belief, self-esteem, self-confidence while also not allowing our ego to be so big and think we can just do anything? How do we balance ego and self-confidence so they don't hurt each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we experience most of the time is extremes.
Yes.
So the two extremes that most of us experience are either I have to think I'm the best, I'm the
Yes.
best in the world,
do
I can
anything.
crush anyone, like I'm like gonna show everyone what I'm like. Or most of us experience the other extreme, which is I'm the worst. I'm the stupidest, I'm the dumbest, I'm the most worthless, I'm the biggest loser. Notice how that's both ego.
Really?
Yes.
Why is the negative
so
ego?
the ego wants to be the best of the best, or the ego wants to be the worst of the worst. The ego won't accept being in the middle.
Really?
The ego wants to feel the deepest sense of being the lowest. And that's why victim mentality
Yes.
is actually a subsequence of ego.
Really?
Yeah, that's how it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita, because the point is that you can't deal with just being bad, you have to be the worst.
My
Yeah.
pain is the worst. I
Exactly.
think Jada talked about this
Yes.
on your podcast where she was like, you know, I had to tell people why my hurt was more painful than their hurt and they could never understand how bad it was. Right?
Exactly.
That's ego
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
ego as well. So you see these two sides of ego keeping us locked away. And so the only way to get with that and the only way to balance it and bring it all into one is genuine self-honesty. Honesty is the best place to be. And the best thing about honesty is I'm really good at this, I'm really average at that, and I'm really bad at that. And the challenge we have with that is most of us have no idea. We just have zero self-awareness about what we are good at, what we are bad at, and what we're average at. So we think, I'm pretty average at everything. I'm pretty good at everything. And when I hear those answers, I'm like, simple things. Just go and talk to people that know you.
Yeah, what am I great at?
Ask them, what's my superpower?
Yeah.
What do I do differently? What do you think I do that is
no one else
different that
does,
no
yeah.
one else does? And guess what? I guarantee you, if you ask a colleague, if you ask a friend, if you ask a family member, if you ask a people
say
from,
different things
they'll
too,
say
yeah.
different things. But you get to learn about yourself. So real confidence comes from knowing your strengths and going all in on them. Your confidence does not come from just standing up the right way or just saying the right stuff to yourself.
Body language only,
Yeah, and that's important. I'm a big believer in all of that, but what I'm saying is that doesn't build real confidence. Real confidence comes from thinking, I'm really good at this, I know I can do this, and I love doing it. And really, this is the most important bit. Confidence comes from serving other people. When you see the impact you have on others, and this is the biggest issue, the reason why we have such low self-esteem today in the world is because people are not serving others. So they don't see the profound impact they have on others. When you put out a video or a podcast and people tag you on Instagram and they say, Lewis, you stopped me from depression, or you helped me out of a divorce.
Yeah.
Or people, when they watch my content, they'll be like, that stopped me from committing suicide, or whatever it is. When you see that, you get such a deep sense of self-worth that you matter. And guess what? Everyone matters. Whether you matter to 1 people or 1 million people, everyone matters. Yeah. But if you see your impact on someone's life, you will feel such a deep sense of self-worth. And so whether you're serving at a, giving out free food, or whether you're serving at a local charity place, or whether you're serving through your work, serve, because when you take that step, you get a boost of self-esteem.
But why do so many of us live in fear and desire mode as opposed to duty and love mode? Why is that? Like, why are we still focused on self as opposed to service?
It's conditioned. It's conditioned, right? I've said this before, that we're wired for generosity, but we're educated for greed. I think I just said it to you 2 years ago when I was on the podcast.
Yes.
And it's like, and when I said that in the statement,
so
it was,
good.
and it's so true. We're wired for generosity, but we're
gosh.
educated for greed, because what happens is when we're kids, you'll see kids
You want to
serve,
share.
go out their
You wanna
way, they
give.
want to share.
It's part of my candy bar, whatever,
Totally,
right?
yeah. And then as we get older, we're told that there's less. And this is what the key is. As we get older, we're told there are finite numbers of how many kids get made onto the basketball or baseball team.
Yes.
We're told there's
We're
a
limited.
finite number of college spaces. We're told there's a finite number of how many tickets there are. We're told there's a finite number of people that are successful. Guess what? In the theater of happiness, there are infinite and unlimited seats. And there is a seat with your name on it.
That's so good.
There is a seat with your name on it in the theater of dreams, in the theater of happiness. But you think that because you think that there are only 100 people allowed in, that if someone else makes it before you, that you don't get in. And guess what? Is there a cap on how many billionaires there are in the world?
No.
No. Is there a cap on how many millionaires there are in the world?
No.
No. Is there a cap on how many happy people there are in the world? No. And that's why I really am encouraging Forbes. I want Forbes, forget printing a rich list, print a
Happiness list?
happy list, print a
Wow.
service list, print a list of who is
We should do
serving.
that. We should do
Who
that.
is serving the most in the world.
Wow.
Right,
That'll be competition based.
Yeah, sure.
I gave more than you
Yeah,
gave.
and that's why it should be service based on time, energy, and money. Because we should start showing how much time people give, how much energy people give. Mother Teresa, I don't think she gave any money to her charities.
Right.
But she gave a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
You know, you look at all the people who made a change in the world, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, like, they may not have given a lot of money to stuff.
Yeah,
They gave time and energy.
You don't have to give resources, but your resourcefulness, your love, your
Love
time,
that.
your focus, your attention, your compassion.
Love that.
You know,
Yeah.
resourcefulness of the heart, not of the wallet, I think is
Love
key.
that.
And you don't need to have a lot of money to make a big impact.
You don't. There's and this is the training. See, we've been educated for greed because we've been told everything's limited. There's limited number of this, limited number of this, number. And every time you play in numbers, and I think it was Bob Marley who said it, but every time you play in numbers, you'll always be dissatisfied because guess what?
Someone's always got more.
Someone's always gonna have more. I was speaking to a friend recently, and this friend was telling me that he bought a home, which is very expensive.
Yes.
Very, very expensive. And he went to a party at someone else's house. And he told me that when he was getting a tour of this party, he found out that this person had a painting on his wall which cost the amount his house cost.
Shut up.
And so he was joking with me. He was
Wow.
like, that guy's
Painting in the house.
He's got my house on his wall.
Wow.
And that just puts things into perspective. And you think about that, like, and then you look at someone like Jeff Bezos and you think, oh, well, he's the richest man in the world, but does he have the most fame? No, he doesn't.
Right.
Does he have the most beauty? Subjective decision. Does he have the most strength or power? Maybe not. And so no one has the most of everything. So when you measure yourself by numbers, you'll always be second, third, fourth, fifth in something.
And I think by measuring yourself by needing to have the most of anything is probably a recipe for unhappiness. Of like, well, okay, I'm not gonna have the most of anything, but I'm gonna have the most money. You're still gonna be unhappy.
Totally.
Even if you have the most of something, doesn't mean you're gonna be happy.
Totally. I think it was Albert Einstein who said it best, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And I love that because it removes this belief that things are finite and limited, and they're not. If you want to be happy and successful, if no matter that there are 700,000 podcasts, if that is your dharma, if that's your calling, if that's your purpose, like, you can do that. There's no cap on how many successful soccer players that can exist at the same
Right.
time.
Or how many books are out in the world.
There's no cap. There's no one stopping you, and that's the mindset that we're educated.
So can you share what that means to hear in between the lines through prayer, meditation, mindfulness, and kind of what this all means? How can we understand this? There's a lot of noise about it, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, beautiful. First of all, I'm glad to be back, man. The School of Greatness is
Excited, man.
a special place, and the fact that this is, so everyone who's listening or watching, this is how you test whether your friend really knows you. Lewis just told my life story in 30 seconds,
Yeah, exactly.
which means that we're real friends. Lewis was able to summarize everything that I've been through in the
Yes.
last 10 years in 30 seconds. So I appreciate you, man.
course,
and,
man.
And I'm really happy to be back. And yeah, I think, let's talk about the term and let's talk about that specific answer. So when I hear the word mindfulness, to me, what it really means is intentionality. What I mean by that is, are you crafting, designing, and intentionally creating your life? Or are you just coasting in the passenger seat of your life, which is just dragging you and driving you wherever it's taking you? And so it's the difference between being the driver or being in the passenger seat. And so to me, living intentionally is what allows you to live a life of by design. And so I'll give you an example of what mindfulness can look like. There's something in the book that I talk about called the 3 S's, which are sights, sense, and sounds. Now, if you think about that, we're exposed to sights, sense, and sounds every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. But how many of us have crafted those to be sights, sense, and sounds that we want in our life? So this is what I realized. When we were monks, one of the most important things was, what was the first thing you saw, the sight, when you woke up?
And right now, most people are probably seeing their screen.
Yeah, I think 80% of people look at their screens first thing in the morning and the last thing at the night. So you're seeing your screen first thing in the morning. But what are you really seeing? You're seeing everyone else's priorities. You're seeing everyone else's issues and challenges. You're seeing everyone else's messages to you, which means you're already starting your day off reactively. But what if you started your morning looking at a painting that inspired you, or a picture of a loved one that brought joy in your heart, or your favorite quote by Lewis or by anyone else that when you read that in the morning, you were like, oh yeah, I feel in charge today to make a difference in the world. So imagine the first thing you saw in the morning was something inspiring. How much would your day change? That's mindfulness. Mindfulness is being intentional and mindful about what you are exposing yourself to. Let's talk about sounds next. So sounds was something that I started to study actually much later from a modern life perspective. But when we were monks, we would wake up to birds, we would wake up to water, we'd wake up to gongs or cymbals. Chants, exactly, which are all beautiful sounds. Now, the crazy thing is all of us wake up to something called an alarm. Now,
Right, just like...
Literally, I don't know why anyone would want to wake up
Alarms.
to an alarm. Why would you want to wake up alarmed? It means now your system is alarming. Like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to wake up in shock, in a state of like a jolt? I don't think that's a positive way to wake up. So changing the sound that you wake up to. Now, I'm not saying that everyone can wake up to nature sounds. Maybe you're one of those people who just hit the snooze button again. But what if you woke up to a sound or a song that brought you joy? Now, when I lived in New York for 2 years, between 2016 and 2018, I started to feel quite exhausted by the end of the day. And I was really looking into like, why is it that I feel tired? And I started to realize I came across this term called cognitive load. And what it means is that a lot of the sounds that you hear in New York City are sounds that are insignificant for your mind to process. Drilling, construction work, taxis honking, driving, cars screeching, scratching.
People yelling at each other in the
People
streets.
yelling at each other on the streets. Like, all of that sound is called cognitive load, where your brain is now trying to make sense of meaningless sound.
Or it's also just like, should I be afraid? This is a loud sound. Is my brain going to fight or flight? Like, I need to protect myself. So you're always being alarmed.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear sirens.
I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. Show me your morning routine and I'll show you your future. That's right. I believe the way you start your day has a direct impact on the success of your business, your finances, your relationships, and of course, your wellness and mental health. So today, I'm inviting you to join me in my latest upcoming free webinar, The 5 Secrets to the Ultimate Morning Routine. If you want to stop getting tripped up with procrastination, holding on to old fears and self-doubt, and start multiplying your income and impact, then this one is for you. It is possible to break out of the routines that aren't serving you and live more peaceful and purposeful days in the future. But first, you need to commit to taking action and showing up to the webinar. So join me, join Team Greatness in our amazing community, and click the link to sign up right now.
Now, when you hear sirens, sirens have an emotional trigger and they have an emotional response to them. So think about your day. Think about when you come home from work. Well, now you're working from home.
Right.
What sound do you want to hear when you're working? What sound do you want to hear at the end of the day? When you sound design your life, that's called mindfulness. That's being intentional. Yes. And then finally, scent. Scent is such a powerful sense that we're not even aware? How many of you, when you smell your favorite food, can't already wait to eat it? Like you can almost taste it.
Salivating.
You're salivating. You can taste it already without, just through scent. Why is it that every time you walk
pizza.
into... my favorite, I think pizza has one of the best scents.
Well, your wife Rowdy's got some amazing food. That was amazing scent. When I walked in the kitchen last week, I was like, this is amazing.
That was for you. That was special. That was for you. That was for you. That was a good meal. That was a really good meal. She really appreciated that you love to eat too. Like she was happy. Her heart was full.
Exactly. Bring a former jock into your house and you'll clear all the food out.
She was like, I've never seen someone eat that much. And I was like, he's this like big American dude. I was like, Lewis is like, he can eat. And so, no, it was great. She was so happy that you appreciated it so much. She really appreciated that.
But the scent is important in your life.
When you walk into a massage spa, it's the scent, the eucalyptus, the lavender, the sandalwood. It
puts you in a peaceful state.
Dude, scent puts you in zen without trying. And so mindfulness is intentionally creating a life that makes you feel what you want to feel without having to just create the feeling from inside. You may say, Jay, I really struggle trying to be positive. I struggle trying to deal with anxiety. I struggle trying to be focused. Your sight, sense, and sounds can help you do that.
Yeah.
And you start creating an environment where you naturally feel that. Like today when I walked into your studio, I saw your books, I saw all these motivational quotes, I saw a boxing glove, and it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in a uplifting environment, right? So you already get triggered.
Exactly. Yeah. I think a friend of mine mentioned one time on the podcast, Chris Lee said you want to create an environment like a rainforest where things can thrive and grow as opposed to having an environment like a desert where things go to die.
That's beautiful.
And if you have sights, scents, and sounds that are like a desert for your life or your heart, then it's going to be hard to grow those things from your heart. But if you create an environment of a rainforest where things can grow, water, nature, cool air, things like that, then you can really start to cultivate that growth. Yeah. You mentioned about creating and designing your life. How much of the world do you think we receive by being here? And how much of the world do we create ourselves?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's a complete dynamic dance between what the Vedic tradition would call fate and free will. So fate is what is already created for you, and a good example would be the place you were born, the type of family you grew up in, the socioeconomic background you had. It was already there when you walked into the world. But within that, you had choices where your free will came about. You had the choice to either do what everyone in your neighborhood did or to do something different. You had the choice to have a relationship with a particular person or not. So what happens is that we're constantly creating new spaces from which we have another choice.
Right.
And so you kind of see it as this dynamic dance between, okay, now I'm in this situation, and now what is my choice in this situation? So I would say, I'm not saying it's equal, I'm saying it's a dynamic balance and a switching process where you're constantly creating a new level, and then now in that level you have a next choice.
Because we didn't have the choice to be created here. We were here, and that wasn't our choice. Now everything after that is our choice, right?
Yeah, and there are some traditions, and I'm a big diver into like reincarnation and past lives. So according to the beliefs of reincarnation and past lives, you have at some point made a choice to be here. But taking it more simplistically, the truth is that when you're brought into a situation, it's the best analogy that I've heard, and it's been told for years, is of a father is an alcoholic. One of the sons that he has decides to become an alcoholic because his father's an alcoholic. The other son decides to never drink alcohol because his father's an alcoholic.
Right.
So they were exposed to the same situation and same scenario. Same environment. But they both made different choices based on their experience. And that's the choice element. That's the element that we should be trying to empower in our lives, because we can constantly say, I'm limited by my environment, or I've been restricted by my environment. And hey, it's true. There are so many of us that have been limited and restricted. But by now you repeating that, you are going to repeat that restriction in your life.
How much of a positive environment supports us in our growth or holds us back? There are some people who have the perfect family situation, resources, beautiful backyards and nature, who are lazy, and there are others who have, divorced parents, abusive parents, abusive friends, an environment of a desert,
Yeah.
and they figure out a way to thrive.
Totally.
How much importance does our environment play in our overall success?
If you look at the examples that you just shared and you really analyze life, you'd see very little, because you see people craft their own life. So a good example for me is that when I came back from living in the ashram, and there were other people who may have been monks who'd also left the path, and I came back to a not financially successful or supportive family. So my family doesn't have abundant wealth and couldn't necessarily have taken care of me or paid for me forever. And I had to figure out my own life. And that to me was a great sense of impetus and incentive to go and figure it out and learn new skills and network and meet people. And I saw other friends whose parents had like a property portfolio with like 10 properties ready to hand them over. They had a BMW the second that they came out, whatever, from their own life.
Yep.
Or I even have friends that had all of that and didn't become monks and didn't even find careers. So I've also got friends that I went to school with that today don't even have careers, even though their parents were really well established.
Right.
Which has, all of these examples have continued me to believe that we truly have influence in more than our environment. Our environment affects us for sure. It plants seeds and weeds into our life, but there is still a choice. And I think even if you feel there isn't a choice, simply by accepting that there is, it means you have a chance to get out of there. And I think that's what...
Because if you don't accept that there is, then you're just going to stay stuck.
Correct. Like, there have been so many times in my life, and there's a beautiful quote from Edison. I don't think I said this last time, but if I did, it's worth repeating. He said that when you believe you've exhausted all options, remember this, you haven't. And the reason why I love that is your mind continuously feels stuck when it's tried the obvious. And that's why a lot of creativity and focus studies say that the first 10 ideas that come to your mind are never the most interesting. It's when you get into the 11th idea that you start breaking the pattern. And so if someone asks you, what's your best business idea? Your first 10 ideas are probably not that innovative. And so the mind constantly gets stuck on that train. And you've got to keep reminding yourself that there is another door. There could be another pathway. I was thinking about a piece of advice so one of my closest spiritual mentors, who was in London, I knew him since I was probably like 12 and properly since I was 18. He passed away this year from stage 4 brain cancer. And he'd had brain cancer for about, I think like 4 years now. And so I hadn't really had a real interaction with him for the past few years, because every time I saw him, he wasn't fully functioning in his short-term memory. His long-term memory was there, but his short-term memory wasn't. And I remember speaking to him probably about 7-8 years ago and asking him the question. I said to him, I've got so many ideas. There's so many things I could do. Where do I start? And he said this beautiful thing to me. He said, you know what? Your role should be to open up every door possible. And he said, let the world close the doors you're not meant to walk through and walk through the ones that remain open. And what I realized is most of us are just not opening up enough doors because we think we only have the option of 2 doors. We look at life as binary, 0 and 1, 0 and 1, right? It's just
this
A
or that,
or B, this or that. And I mean, I think you'd say this too about you and every guest you ever had on. I don't think life is ever this or that. It's like this, that, and maybe that, and that. And there's always a gap.
Of course. The challenge that people have that I've sensed a lot is the fear of criticism when you go after something that you weren't supposed to do or that people don't think you're supposed to do. Why do so many people fear criticism from peers, family, friends, the media? Why is that such a big fear? And how do we overcome criticism from others?
Psychologically, we feel a sense of safety and security when we think people agree with us. Right? That is just psychologically true, that we would rather avoid conflict and sit in a space where we agree, and therefore we have something called confirmation bias and the echo chamber, where we keep surrounding ourselves with thoughts and ideas that are similar and reaffirm our beliefs. Now, I think that you can have that and at the same time entertain ideas that you're not sure about yet. And so one of my favorite examples was MIT did this study where they asked people which person was more creative and innovative. And they showed 2 charts. One chart was employee A and the other chart was employee B. The chart for employee A, all of the people they knew each other and knew them back. So it was almost like a closed loop. And employee B, they knew lots of people who didn't know each other. And they found that people who have more people in their network who don't know each other are more likely to be creative and productive.
Really? Why is that?
Because they expose you to opposing ideas and they may counteract how you think. So one of my favorite examples of this is a conversation between Mark Zuckerberg and one of his mentors. So Mark Zuckerberg told this story at the Facebook headquarters a few years back. I wasn't there, I've seen it on video, and I'm sure it's available. And he talks about how when he was struggling with the direction of Facebook in 2009, he approached his mentor. And his mentor happened to be Steve Jobs.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Wow.
Pretty cool. I
That's
wish.
really
yeah,
cool.
it's so cool, man. And so anyway, so Mark Zuckerberg goes to Steve Jobs and he says, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. Remember at that time, Facebook was 5 years old.
There was no fan pages, I don't think.
I don't think it was, there was no creators, I don't think there were fan pages. It was very much used by university students
still,
at that stage.
yeah.
Like I think it was mainly like Ivy Leagues.
College
and
kids still,
College
yeah.
kids. And I don't even think it was international in a massive way. Very early days, and now we can't even think of that. But 2009, I mean, you know, you just about had the iPhone and just about had Instagram
Crazy,
and YouTube.
man.
So he went up to Steve Jobs and he said, you know, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. What do I do? Now, Steve Jobs at that time obviously was already the founder of one of the biggest brands on the planet, and obviously the brand still is. He had access to investors, he had access to business coaches. I'm sure he had access to life coaches. He had access to
Health experts and everything.
He had access to anything. Like I don't think there was anyone,
Scientists, whatever, yeah.
scientists, PhDs. I don't think there's anyone in the world who Steve Jobs couldn't have called up at the time. And Steve Jobs said something amazing. He said, "You know what, Mark? I think you should go and live in an ashram in India."
He did not.
He did.
No
It's
way.
a true story. He goes, and when you go to live in the ashram in India, that's where, if you spend some time there, that's where you'll find your answer.
Shut up.
And Mark did it.
No
Mark
way.
went to the ashram. It's a true story.
For how long?
I believe he was there for, I've seen two online. I've seen two versions of the exact time he was there. I've seen some people say it was a couple of days or a week, or some people said it's a month. So I think it's hazy how much time he actually spent there. But he went. And he says that based on that experience, that's where he found the direction of Facebook, to be connecting people. Now, the reason why I love that story is because it's the unobvious, alternative, random connection. And when Harvard did a study of 3,000 executives, they looked at and asked them, what's the number one skill for being a good leader? And a lot of people would say communication. A lot of people would say
Vision.
vision,
Yeah.
strategy, humility. And the number one answer that they got from 3,000 executives was the one word, which is called associating. And what that means is the ability to spot patterns where everyone else doesn't see them. And that's the connect, that real leaders can spot patterns and connections in anomalies. So most people will be like, what has an ashram got to do with a tech platform?
Right.
But that is where you expand your mind to find answers that you never expected.
How important is creating alone time with noises, people, busy work to allow your mind to expand? Is
Yeah.
that the only time in that silence? I think you mentioned it. Silence to hear in between the lines.
Yeah.
Is that where we start to hear what we're supposed to be creating, where we're supposed to be heading, our mission?
I'm really glad you brought that back. I wanted to get back to that. So when we talk about, there's a beautiful statement by David Lynch, who's movie producer and a deep meditator. And he says that prayer is how you talk to God and meditation is how God talks to you.
Ooh.
And whether you believe in God or the universe or spirit or divine, whatever it means, the point is that there is a dialogue and a conversation.
So prayer is like you're speaking, you're saying, here's what I want.
Here's how
or
I feel.
Help me.
Help me, yeah.
And meditation is more receiving.
Receiving, yeah. And so I love that statement because I think it makes it very clear that we have to have a dialogue with the universe. We have to have a dialogue with people in our lives. We have to have a dialogue, and there's both giving and receiving. So when I talk about hearing in between the lines, the best example I can give you, Lewis, is let's take a look at you and your relationship and mine and my wife's relationship. One of us is always traveling.
Yeah.
So you travel, your partner travels, I travel, my wife travels. Sometimes we're missing each other. Imagine you've got really busy and hectic, Do you think, and anyone listening or watching, you can ask the same question, if you were really busy and hectic and stressed out, do you think your partner feels comfortable to tell you how they feel and get your attention?
If I'm busy, stressed out,
Yeah.
overwhelmed, will
Yeah.
my partner tell me how I feel about themselves or about?
Yeah, do you think they would feel confident to be like, Lewis, I need to tell you something really important?
I don't think they would.
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They really wouldn't, because
They don't want to stress you out more.
They don't want to stress you out
You're
more.
not present. All these things.
exactly. So exactly that. And so what happens is when you're still, your mind and body actually get to speak to you and give you signals of how they feel. And so when you're still, that's when you notice that ache in your foot that you haven't noticed for a month. Sometimes when you slow down, that's when you get sick, because your body wasn't allowing itself to be sick because you were pushing it to get through stuff. And so just like your partners can't communicate with you until you slow down, your body and mind can't communicate with you until you still. And so there's a beautiful Buddhist teaching that says what movement does for the body, stillness does for the mind. And so when we find that space, stillness, and solitude, you really are able to hear your deepest desires and challenges, your physical pains and areas of growth. It's one of the reasons why when people meditate, they feel sleepy afterwards and they think they're doing it wrong, but actually they're doing it right. Meditation just told you needed more sleep.
You need to rest.
Yeah, meditation was just a signal. So sometimes when I meditate with people that I'm coaching,
Like pass out.
yeah, some of them will be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jay. I'm just feeling so tired." And I'm like, "No,
then sleep, then
that's,
rest."
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
your body's telling you because you finally listened." And some people are like, "Oh, Jay, I feel so energized." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you allowed yourself to be in line with your body, and now your body's saying that you feel energized, and that's
Yeah.
great. You've got that energy. Go work out. Go build something." So.
Or you've cleared out those negative thoughts, or you've let go of those distractions, or
Whatever
that
it is.
resentment, and so you're not feeling this weight, so you feel lighter.
Correct. And so that stillness and silence is one of my favorite ways for you to actually build that relationship with hearing your inner voice.
Is there too much silence? Like if you say, okay, 5 hours a day, is there a tipping point when you're like, okay, I think you do 2 hours every morning, but a lot of people say, well, I've only got 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Is 5 hours too much? Is an hour, what is the maximum or minimum or the sweet spot you think for people to be silent every day
Yeah.
to live a great life?
I think 20 minutes is a great starting point.
Yeah.
Because 20 minutes is significant enough time for your mind to switch off. So we hear that studies showed that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day.
And a lot of them are repeating.
negative. 80% are negative, and
Yeah.
I'm guessing a lot of them are repeated.
Yeah.
And so if you're only going to say, I'm going to do 5 minutes, it just takes 5 minutes to switch off. Like it takes 5 minutes to just overcome that noise. And so I'd say that 20 minutes is a good amount of time. And hey, you're not trying, and I think this is the challenge with meditation and mindfulness, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just trying to be present with it and actually
listen better.
and listen to it and experience it.
Why did you decide that you wanted to be a monk in the first place, and how old were you when you did that?
Absolutely. So the story starts with something I've been saying a lot called you can't be what you can't see. So I didn't grow up wanting to be a monk. Like
What did you grow up wanting to be?
Yeah, I grew up wanting to be a mix of an art director, like for a big magazine or online company, because I loved design, I loved graphics, I loved video and art when I was growing up. I loved philosophy and I loved economics. Those were like my three favorite subjects: art, design, philosophy, and economics. And I always thought I'd be something boring like an investment banker, because I often say when you grow up in a Asian or Indian family, and if you have any Asian or Indian followers, they'll agree, I had three options. I could either be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure, right? Those were like my three options. And so that's what I was going to be. I couldn't be any of those, so I was going to be an investment banker or a strategy consultant, because I was like, I'm rubbish at medicine, I'm not very good at law. So I was kind of going down that route, because you can't be what you can't see. And growing up as a young Asian person in London, you don't see many people in the media, you don't see many Asians in sport, you don't see many Asians in anything apart from accountancy, business, medicine, and law. That's literally what you see. And then I was 18, I'm at university, I'm studying my undergraduate, which is in behavioral science.
In London.
In London. So I've always been fascinated by why people do what they do. Always fascinated by why we make decisions, why we lie, why people cheat, why people pretend to be someone they're not. Like all those questions always fascinated me, but just from an intellectual point of view, rather than helping people unpackage it. So I was studying that. And then at my university, we'd have some of the best entrepreneurs coming to speak every week.
In London, right?
In London.
Yeah.
At Cass Business School. So there's people coming in every single week. And then I found out that the week later, after been watching entrepreneur after entrepreneur, loved hearing from CEOs, their success stories. I was a huge fan of rags to riches stories. Like, not the riches because of wealth, but just that whole thing of like people going from nothing to something. Like, that fascinated me. So I used to read autobiographies. I thought I hated reading until I was 14, until someone handed me an autobiography. I think I remembered reading The Rock's autobiography back then too, because I used to watch wrestling. But anyway, so I'm fascinated by people who go from nothing to something. And then a monk's invited to speak at my university. And I actually get forced along. I'm actually not that interested. I'm like, what's a monk going to teach me? Who cares? Like, I've never seen a monk in my life. Don't really know what they do. Get forced by one of my mates to come along. I basically have nothing better to do that night. I turn up. I'm hearing this monk speak, and he captivated me like the most beautiful woman in the world, right? I was just completely enthralled and addicted to everything he said. I was hanging off every word, and there was a voice in my head that was just like, who is this guy? And then I find out that he'd given up jobs at Google and Microsoft to become a monk. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, who does that? You know, everyone that I've ever met, that's all they've been chasing. And all the stories that I'd followed in life were people who went from nothing to something. And here was a guy who had something, but had traded it to have nothing, but looked like the happiest person I'd ever met. So it was like the most paradoxical moment of my life, like the most ironic thing that could have happened. Anyway, so I go and speak to him afterwards. I loved networking with speakers. I'd always approach people after their speech if I was moved. I went up to him and I just said, you know what, everything you said just resonated with me. And there was one thing that he said that stood above everything, and he spoke about this principle about plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. All right? Plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit. What he meant was selfless service, giving without expecting, using everything you have, doing something for nothing, just being able to give. And for some reason, that 18-year-old me, hearing about selflessness, that word kind of just, I don't know what it was. It was just one of those moments that just, it penetrated through every desire I had. And service and selflessness became like my biggest aspiration in like a moment. And I started talking to him. So I started interning with him in India as a monk every summer holidays.
Really?
So I'd finish
so you're
my
a freshman this year when you
I was basically 18. I guess so.
19,
Yeah, I guess that's what you call it when you just started out.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So after the first year, you had a summer break.
Correct.
You go to India to be with him for what, a month, 2 months?
Yeah, a month or 2 months. However, so I'd get a summer holiday. I'd spend half of it working at a big corporate firm because I thought that's what I was going to do. And I'd spend the rest of it and Christmas holidays that we get in London, I'd spend it in India, just kind of shadowing him. And I describe it like that. I was literally interning to be a monk, where you live like a monk, you practice monk principles, you follow what they do on a daily basis, and you get to experience what it's like. And I'd work at I'd work at some of these biggest companies in the world, and then I'd go to living as a monk, like polar opposites. We'd be out at night, drinking, networking after this work gig, right? The stuff you do, bars, clubs, etc. And then like for the rest of the months, I'm like meditating and spending time with these enlightened beings. And I can honestly say, having tested and experimented both, I fell in love with that lifestyle more. So having everything on that side versus having nothing on that side, I fell in love with having nothing. And so it was like a perfect A and B test. You know, it was like the perfect process. So
everything and nothing, which,
Yeah, so I always say you can't be what you can't see. I wouldn't have become a monk if I didn't see a monk. That's my journey to why it started. Why did I decide to become a monk? Because I got to meet a monk, which exploded the horizons and possibilities of what I could be, first of all. I became a monk because I got fascinated by giving everything you have in the service of others. At a very early age, I just got fascinated by that principle. And the third thing was I fell in love with the lifestyle of a monk more than I did of a modern person.
Why did you fall in love with that?
I fell in love with it because I got so fixated on the fact that what if you could spend your whole life just helping people? Like, what if that's all you did? What if you had to learn, grow, create just to make a difference in people's lives?
Yeah.
And you didn't need anything back, and you didn't want anything back. And the only example I'd seen of that at that age was the monk. So that was the only kind of
Right.
test I had, right? That's the only person I'd experienced.
You hadn't met someone who started a nonprofit or something like that who could
I
like
had, but I had met people who'd done NGOs and not-for-profits, but I always found that they were still looking for funding.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I didn't necessarily fall in love with their character. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
That when I was with the monks, I felt completely in love with their character, the way they behaved,
Their purity,
the way they
their-
spoke, their purity,
yeah.
their whole demeanor was just so attractive. And I was like, that's what I want to be when I grow up, you know? So while everyone else wanted to be other stuff, when I was 18, I wanted to be a monk.
Wow.
So yeah, but I still, yeah, anyway.
How many summers did you spend with him before you said, okay?
3. So throughout the whole of university, I spent 3. So every break I spent with him.
And then after college,
Then after college, that was it. I didn't even go, so I graduated, but I didn't turn up to my graduation ceremony. So my mum's still upset that she doesn't have a picture of
Oh
me
my
holding the
gosh.
scroll, wearing the hat. And I left for India straight away.
why didn't you complete it then?
I finished, as in I graduated in the sense of I had my degree.
But why didn't you go all the way, see it all the way
Because
through?
I remember it being delayed till December, and we finished in May,
and
and
you're
I was just like, I'm not waiting till December, and I'm not coming back for that. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
What does it even mean?
Yeah.
And I left, so I literally, that's it.
I don't care, I want nothing in my life.
Yeah, and then I went.
Wow.
Yeah, so I left, and I was 22 years old, and I just left. I just wanted to be there and be with him and be with the other monks. And I saw them doing all this incredible work. It's not like they were just being monks in the way people think. I always talk about how half the day was silence and half the day is service. So the service side is building sustainable villages, building food distribution programs, teaching, helping communities. It wasn't just being, it was doing as well. So I loved that aspect of half the day to grow myself and then half the day to give.
Yeah.
And I was just like, when am I going to have time to do this if I work a job?
Right. What's
yeah.
a typical day like then? What time did you wake up?
Yeah.
And you wake up on like a concrete floor with like a little yoga mat type of thing?
Literally, yeah. So we'd sleep
Like a
on the
bamboo
floor.
mat or
The
something?
floor was wood. It was like this,
Yeah.
this nice wood that you have. It was decent wood. So it was wood. You have it thin yoga mats. So anyone who does yoga knows those thin yoga mats, not the posh ones. And then your sleeping bag, literally.
So you got a sleeping bag?
Yeah, you get a sleeping bag, right?
A
And
pillow
you
or
just-
no pillow?
Most people didn't use their pillows, but I had a nice sleeping bag. I was still that monk from London. Like everyone could tell, right? It was like
Yeah,
oh,
he's
his
not a real
sleeping bag
monk
looks a bit too premium, but I was like, this is the
Yeah,
least I can do.
of course.
So I still had the premium sleeping bag. We'd wake up at about 4 a.m. every day, every single day, 4 a.m.
So the first week must have been a little rough to like get into the...
Well, you know what? The way I remember is that I was so pumped that I talked myself into it. Plus, I'd been doing it every summer. So it wasn't new. It wasn't like I just threw myself in. I'd lived like that for 3 summers.
Yeah.
So I was kind of aware of what it was like, but I'd pumped myself so much. I'm gonna be there at 3:30. I'm gonna wake up earlier than everyone. I was in that. And I've always been like that. I've always been someone who wants to push.
I want to do a workout before everyone's
Literally,
up.
I was like, I'm gonna meditate 2 hours before everyone's awake. And so I'm pushing myself to limits that I didn't know, and I wanted to test it. I was like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. So,
Wow.
So I was like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. So I'm just going to do this properly. So I ended up, waking up at 4 a.m. From 4 till 5:15, you have collective meditation, collective
Group?
prayers, collective chant, group.
Chanting.
Chanting.
Group chanting.
Yeah, group
That must have
chanting.
been very like healing almost at the same time, just like chanting together and
Yeah.
the symphony that you create with the melodies and...
We underestimate what it feels like to be in a place where people have meditated for hundreds of thousands of years. Like places take on energies. And that place was a place where people have meditated, those 2 monasteries, people have meditated for like 40 years in that space.
Right.
For over 4 hours a day. So you're like walking into like the most spiritual, sacred atmosphere in the world. You only tap into that more. When we go to a place, we know what it feels like when you've been on a stage that Michael Jackson performed at, or when you'd been in an arena where, your favorite artist, whatever it is, the analogy that works for you. It was like walking into the arena of the monks,
Wow.
like that
The
level.
legendary monks.
Yeah,
of-
the legend of meditate, like everything you expect a spiritual atmosphere to contain, you're getting that because it's amazing. So yeah, it was 4 to 5:15 is group meditation. Then 5:15 to 7 is private meditation. So that's your personal practice. So that's already 3 hours since you've been awake, right? 7 o'clock till 7:30 is group meditation, group chanting again. And then 7:30 to 8:30 is a wisdom class on the Vedas. So the Vedas are 5,000 years old, linguistically and philosophically the oldest books on the planet. And so you're trained in the Vedas for an hour, 7:30 to 8:30. And then
5,000-year-old book?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's the oldest book, oldest dated book I've heard of. So, yeah,
wow.
Over 5,000 years old.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It was funny, actually. I was sharing this, and I share this all the time, but then I'm going to throw this in there, but when I was at Ty's house, he said this to me. He said that, and I was telling him about the Bhagavad Gita, which is 5,000 years old. And he said to me, 5,000 years, just like you did. And I was just like, yeah, 5,000 years. He goes, if it lasted 5,000 years, that must be a really good book. And it's true, if you think about it, how many
keep using it,
Yeah, how many things still matter and change lives today that did 5,000 years ago? Will the Beatles be around in 5,000 years? Will Elvis, will me, will you, will any of this? But the fact that a book has withstood 5,000 years.
Pretty impressive.
That's pretty impressive. Anyway, so we do that from 7:30 to 8:30. And then at 8:30 you get breakfast, right? You finally get breakfast. And from 8:30 to 9, whatever you eat breakfast. And then for the rest of the day, you'd spend the morning studying the books again on a personal level. You'd do basic things like cleaning, you'd wash your clothes, you'd, all the domestic stuff that you have to do, clean the space you live in. And then usually by lunchtime, everything changed. I'd either be out teaching local communities, or we'd be helping build these sustainable villages, food distribution programs, etc. So the rest of the day was not as planned as the morning. So when we now talk about morning routines, when I hear about that, I'm just like, yeah, that's like a monk thing. Like as a monk, you're trained to have an incredible morning routine, and then whatever you do in your day will be incredible because you've started off correctly. So it's interesting to see the rise of the morning routine as habits and success, because as a monk, that's what you're trained in.
Wow.
So yeah, that's roughly the schedule. And then it changes after 9:30 a.m.
And where in India was this?
So this is in Mumbai and 4 hours south of Mumbai.
Okay, wow.
So, but when you go outside of Mumbai, I'm looking at these beautiful plant things you have here. It's kind of like that, it's just like woodlands, like green.
Really?
Yeah, like no cars, no traffic, no noise, fresh air.
How would you guys commute then, or travel to speak or teach or build homes?
So we would have cars that we would either drive ourselves. I never drove in India. I never would drive in India.
Right,
it's the
that's crazy.
scariest experience in the
Crazy.
world. People get scared about New York. India is just a different level.
Yeah.
So I never drove, but they would have drivers, etc., who would drive us around, monks that drive, etc.
So the, what's it called, the place you were at?
Ashram, or
Yeah,
a monastery.
ashram.
So a monastery is an ashram. Ashram is just a Sanskrit
Got it.
word for a monastery.
So it had like some funding so you guys could rent cars or whatever?
Yeah, so the funding comes from donors that really believe in the work you're doing, and then that money is used effectively. Again, people say, oh, how do monks drive? How do monks use money? Well, we'd never use it for ourselves. We had 2 sets of clothes. We didn't have any possessions, but we were using the cars and what we had to create these communities, to create sustainable villages, to create change in the world. So again, everything's being utilized for a higher purpose, rather than the mentality of, oh, you can't use that. So if we didn't use that, we might be happy, but how are you going to help the rest of the world?
Right.
So that's how we were trained.
Were you in contact with your family as well during this time, or?
Yeah, I used to connect with my family because the tradition was taught of like that, again, that balance between detachment and attachment. So it said that detachment and attachment are 2 sides of the same coin, attachment and aversion. So some people just want to be monks or want to have isolation because they want to get away from reality, which is no better than being fully attached. So the Bhagavad Gita says that attachment and aversion are 2 sides of the same coin. So actually the ideal is the central balance, where you're able to talk to your parents, you're able to give them love, you're able to be grateful, but then again, you're still realizing that there's more impact you can have in the world than just making your parents happy. So it's that perfect dynamic balance between the two. So I'd speak to my mom and dad every month probably, catch up with them on the phone. If I was in Europe and traveling for what we were trying to do as monks, then I'd come and see them, etc., say hello to them. So I wasn't completely detached, but it was always making sure that balance. Not like, oh, I'm not that monk life should, the way we were trained is monk life should never be an escape from reality. It shouldn't be that you can't do anything else in life and you don't want responsibilities. That's why you become a monk, right? So it was very much ingrained in us that you're not here because you can't do anything else. You're here because you know this is higher and you can have more of an impact in your life in the world.
So, but you're not supposed to be in a relationship or have
No.
sex as a monk.
No, you're a celibate monk. So,
So
no.
why do you detach from that then?
Yeah, good
Why do
question.
you escape from that?
So that's to be able to give yourself all the time, focus, and energy on personal growth and development. So we all know this, right? Anyone who's been, and I've been in multiple relationships before I became a monk. We all know this. When you're in a relationship, things slow down because now you're managing two minds. You're now having to give energy to another person. You have to give time to another person. You lose time, energy, and moments to invest in your own growth. So monks traditionally have lived celibate lives so that they can focus on their own growth, so that they're not distracted, they're not falling prey to any lust or engaging in any flirtatious conversations that again brings down the
Distract the
consciousness
mind,
and
yeah.
distracts the mind. You're learning to train your mind like an athlete. Like so many athletes can't, I mean, maybe you had this experience too, but I remember reading David Beckham's autobiography many years ago, and he was talking about that, how they were trained not to have sex before big games, right? No alcohol in the weeks leading up to big games. I remember him talking about how when all his friends were out partying, he'd have to get to bed on time.
Yeah.
So it's like you see athletes go to very similar training as monks.
Sure.
So it's not abnormal. We see it in modern life where people who have to be peak performance, they also use the same measures.
Yeah.
Very similar measures to monk life.
Doesn't personal growth also come from experiencing life and not detaching from it, only
Yeah.
isolating yourself, but also experiencing all the things that could happen in life and growing in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole thing there is that most of us just throw ourselves into the deep end and then try swim and figure it out.
Right.
Monk life actually begins at like 5 years old. Like the training of monk life is ultimately training in self-actualization and self-awareness. It's meant to start when you're 5. The problem is we all went to normal schools that try to put stuff in us rather than take stuff
Yeah,
out of us.
it's crazy.
You talk about this.
Right.
Right? Like, you were told at school that you weren't very good and
Right.
you weren't good at English and now you have a New York Times bestseller,
Right, yeah.
And it's like, but no one noticed that potential inside you. No one noticed that, oh, Lewis was really creative.
Right.
And you're not the only person. There's so many people who feel like that. So the modern schooling system didn't extrapolate your self-actualization, your element, and just try to put maths, English, science inside. So the point is that you're trying to get to such a strong foundation that when you interact in the world, you're going with a sense of strength, fuel, energy to make a difference. Rather than going into the world and then going, oh my God, where am I? Trying to figure it out. And I find what happens today is that when you don't, we all know this, self-love has become such a big thing now. That when people don't figure out, yeah, it's like a huge trend now. But my point is that if you don't start at a place where you have self-awareness, self-actualization, you have figured out what works for you, what your strengths are, how you want to be in an environment, when you walk out there, most of us just pretend to be someone else. Most of us get lost. Most of us get carried away.
Yeah.
So my point is strengthen yourself, grow yourself, and then of course interact with the world. So we had that. We were going out to pitch to Forbes Rich List members to fund our philanthropy work.
Wow.
Right? We'd be in these pitch meetings dressed as monks and then be laying bricks the next moment.
Oh my God.
So you get the perfect balance. At one point you're in this fancy office and the next morning you're laying bricks, you're like digging. So it's not that you're not getting both, you are getting both. Just the relationship aspect of a female partner or a male partner if you're a female monk is limited because the whole aim is to allow you to just focus on first finding yourself before you try and find the checklist you've been following your whole life.
What would you say are the 3 questions we should ask ourselves every single day that would help us improve our life?
In that moment,
Internal questions every day during meditation. What should I be asking myself, and what should the world be asking ourselves in order to make sure we're living a purposeful life?
yeah, what a beautiful question. Yeah, I'd say one of the first questions that always comes to my mind is how can I be of service today? How can I be and this is extended from that first question, how can I be an instrument of love, compassion, and kindness? And that's what I count as service in my own definition. And so what I would say to anyone listening is define the words yourself. Because what service means to you, me, may be different to you.
Right.
And so it's important. But for me, it's like, how can I be of service today? And the reason why I love that is, we've talked about this before, when you're wired for service, you're set up, right? We talked about in the last podcast, like service sets you up to feel satisfaction, to build bonds and create connections, and does so much. So being of service is one of the first questions I would ask. The second question I would ask myself is, what do I love about myself? Right? What do I actually love about myself?
That is probably the most powerful question anyone could ask, because most people never learn to love themselves.
Totally.
And we always find the things that we don't love about ourselves, and we fixate on those things. And that's one of the repeating thoughts in our head that keeps us playing small every day.
All the time. And we talk a lot about today self-love and self-care. But I think, a lot of that starts with self-awareness, which we know about, self-knowledge. But self-knowledge creates self-trust. And a lot of it's like learning to trust ourselves. And it's like, if I don't know what I love about myself, how am I ever going to trust myself? How am I going to trust that I have my best interest at heart?
Yeah.
And so asking yourself, what do you love? And then the third and final question I think I would ask myself is who do I want to be? Right? Who is the person that I need to be that I can love, that I want to love, that I want to give more love to? Like, what parts of growth are there still available? And there's one thing I want to add, which isn't a question, but it has been a really reaffirming or deepening affirmation for me that I keep reminding myself, and I think it's helped a lot of people that I've shared it with, is literally some days I'll just put my hand on my heart and I'll just repeat to myself, I'm exactly where I need to be. And
So true.
it's just such a great reminder. Like, if you literally put your hand on your heart and you just go, I am exactly where I need to be, you stop getting lost in the future, you stop worrying about the past, and you realize that everything you need to learn, everything you read right now to make a change, it's all right now, it's all right here. And so that's one of my favorite things to repeat. It's not a question, but
It's more of a mantra saying...
correct, yeah.
Because I find it so hard for people today who compare themselves to everyone online about not being where they want to be, or not having the career or the relationship or the body or whatever, the following or the attention. A lot of people compare themselves to other people in their space, friends, family, and then don't feel enough. And so when we say to ourselves, I'm exactly where I need to be, does that help us eliminate the feeling of not being enough?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, because we're always feeling like we either feel like we're ahead, we feel like, I'm doing better than everyone, I'm kind of like winning the game, or more often we feel behind, where we feel like, they just got promoted. They just, they got proposed to. Whatever it is, like we're always feeling
They had
ahead.
their first child or
They
whatever.
had their first child. They bought their first house, whatever it is. And we're always feeling ahead or behind. And so when you say to yourself, I'm exactly where I need to be, you realize you're not ahead or behind. And the problem is, if you always think you're ahead or behind, then you're always comparing yourself to others. Whereas if you're where you need to be, you now just need to get to the next place of where you want to be.
Yeah.
And also, you only get ahead of yourself by first being present with yourself.
And I think it's really hard to say that when you're in a challenging place in your life. I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm broke. My dog died. My girlfriend broke up with me. It's hard to accept that.
Yeah.
And I've been there. I know you've been there. And it's really challenging to say, my life is perfect right now, when you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
But I think when you can learn to accept timing of life and know that, a mentor of mine early on, when I was broke and I was an intern, working for free for 6 months for someone, I was living on my sister's couch. I remember saying, I would do walks with him every day. And I was like, man, I could really use some money, in my life. I'm just sick of being broke. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, money comes to you when you're ready for it. And I was like, I feel pretty ready right now. I feel like I could have some money.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for it. Mentally, emotionally, my life wasn't set up. I didn't have systems set up in place to really receive the money and be able to do good with it and be able to use it for good in my life and put it to good use. And later, when I started to make money, I realized I probably would have blown that money. I would have spent it poorly. I would have made the wrong investments, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear when things aren't going well, but I think trusting the timing of your life. If you would have built your empire 7 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been ready for, maybe you would have been, but you wouldn't have been ready, or social media wasn't the right timing for your message to be out there. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that if I wouldn't have gone to monk school, then I think you can become successful but still feel extremely dissatisfied. or misuse the success.
Yes.
And I don't think that can be blamed on anyone because no one's ever been taught how to deal with failure or success. There's no class on here's how you deal with failure or here's how you deal with success. But the funny thing is those are the two most extreme things that we all experience.
And the things we're most afraid of are failure and success.
And success.
So how do we deal with failure? If you could give a mini masterclass
Yeah.
right now, what would you suggest to people who are afraid to fail, how to deal with it?
Yeah. I think one of my first things in failure is don't take it more personally than it actually is. And I'll give an example of that. When I was applying to 40 companies that all rejected me before an interview, all I was getting was an automated response saying your application will not go any further. I can't take that personally because they didn't meet me in person. They didn't have a interaction with me. They just saw my name. They saw I'd been a monk for 3 years. That resume is useless. I mean, what's your transferable skills? Like sitting in silence and stillness. Surprise, surprise, no one wants to hire a monk. And so they rejected you, but that's not personal because they didn't meet me in person.
But what if they had meeting you in person?
Right, so that's the first step. The first step is don't take all failure. I'll give an example. Me and you, we reach out to countless guests to be on our podcast.
Who say no all the time.
Who say no all the time. But if I don't hear a no from the guest directly, that's not a no. Like someone's team can say no, someone's assistant can say no, someone's PR team can say no, but until they say no personally, it's not a no.
Okay, but when they do say no,
then that's a no. Yeah, so then let's move to that.
So how do you deal with that type of failure?
Yes, so if I deal with a failure where someone meets me in person and gets to know me.
No, Jay, you're horrible, you suck, like I don't want to deal with a monk ever in my life.
Yeah.
I would never go on your show, I'm never listening to you, never.
Yeah.
Then how do you deal with that type of
So
failure?
I've heard you say this, I've said it a couple of times and I'm sure it's been repeated a bunch of times around how I genuinely believe failure has feedback.
It's feedback,
And so for me, it's like failure has the ability to actually tell you what you need to improve. Now, not to improve to get their attention, improving to get the actions that you want to take.
Yeah, the results you want.
The results you want. And don't make that result about the person who said no. Don't use failure as a way to prove someone else wrong.
Because what happens when we prove others wrong?
When you prove others wrong, you end up trying to get validation and approval for them. And now if they're not impressed when you're right, you lose again. So you end up losing twice.
And you spend all this time and energy, years maybe, to prove someone wrong. I've been there many times. And then you're like, I felt good for a moment. And then I feel empty again.
Totally. And so that's the thing about failure in the second half is you have to see failure as an improvement. If I'm completely honest, everyone who rejected me in my life up until now has made me more hungry, taught me so much more about myself, and made me up my game.
Yeah.
And I think if failure doesn't make you up your game, it's the same as losing in a sport, right? When you fail and you've lost games and you've won games, you know, on the big stages.
You didn't have the skills, you didn't have the teamwork, you guys weren't hungry enough,
you weren't communicating enough.
There's something you were missing.
Yeah.
So you go review the game film, you check the stats, you see what could I have done better, and you try to improve that for the next game.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can do that in life, but we're so afraid to like go on the next game of life. Like I got rejected once and it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
How do people learn to overcome that pain of rejection?
Yeah.
To keep going.
Yeah.
You know, in sports, luckily there's a season, which is like you might have 30 basketball games. After you lose the first two, you don't say, I'm just going to give up the rest of the season.
Yeah.
You keep playing.
Yes.
But in life, a lot of people stop playing.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I think that's great mental training too. I think sports is great mental training because you have to show up to the next game even if you lost and you don't feel bad.
Exactly.
That you don't feel good, sorry. And one of the things, before I dive into that question, one of the things that you reminded me of was the Last Dance documentary. So there's that season that Michael Jordan, everyone is in agreement that he is one of the best players to be playing. And they keep losing.
And they didn't make the finals.
Right? They didn't make the finals. They lost. And then they realized they need to get the team. And they need to find, I think they're bringing Dennis Rodman. And then they start bringing in all these other players that strengthen. Whereas if they would have just said, oh, we got the best player in the world, we just keep doing this, I'm not sure they would have got there, right? But the coach, Phil Jackson, and the team, they had to adapt. And so you're saying, why do we feel that pain in rejection and how do we deal with that? I think we feel that pain because we look at a failure, right? We look at it as a complete definition of us, right? We're looking at it as there's that famous statement of like, you know, failure is an event, not a person.
Right.
And I don't know who said it, but it's one of those statements that really clicks. Like failure is an event, not a person. Whereas we start thinking we are the failure. Like we say, I am a failure. Exactly. Exactly, right? Like those are the words. I am a failure. I got rejected. And it's like, no, your application got rejected.
Yeah, your efforts.
Your effort, your specific effort at this moment in time got rejected. Your specific exam at this point got failed. You are not a failure. And so you have to disconnect and distance yourself from the event.
You know what's interesting is like no one who was successful at everything they did ever told a good story. Like the greatest stories are the ones who overcame failure and adversity. It's not the ones who are like, everything was easy for me. Everyone loved me. Everyone accepted my actions. I didn't have to work hard. And it just came to me effortlessly.
Yeah.
Like people don't care about that.
No.
That's not a good story. That's not an inspirational human being.
Yeah.
It's the human that had to deal with adversity that we really admire and we look up to.
Yeah.
Even if they had some low moments, it's a much better story of hearing about someone's failure than hearing how they succeeded.
Totally. And that's a beautiful lesson that one of the biggest mistakes we make is we don't study the stories of the greats. So how many people's lives have you studied from start to finish?
Yeah.
If you've studied someone's life from start to finish, I genuinely believe this is like the core skill that's needed. I would say that the people I admire, I've studied their lives from start to finish. I know why they made bad decisions, what they consider to be good decisions. Like there's autobiographies and biographies out there. There's podcasts like ours where people can come and listen to people's stories. If you've not studied someone's story, then you can't follow that path because every time you hit a rejection, so every time I get rejected, I think of Steve Jobs getting kicked out of his own company.
Crazy, isn't
Every
it?
time I fail, I think about Michael Jordan losing a game. Every time I get tired of training, I think about Cristiano Ronaldo putting in that extra rep. Those are the visual cues that we need, but you only get those visual cues if you've done the research and the study. And then you go, oh, if Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company, but then still had the audacity at one point to go and build Pixar, then I think I'm all right if I just didn't get this job.
Yeah, and and Apple wouldn't be where it is today without him getting kicked out, learning the lessons, having humility, like gaining some compassion, all the things that people said he didn't have fully at that time. He learned by having to be kicked out, start something else, bring a new perspective.
Yeah.
What did you call it? The association?
Yeah, associating, yeah.
Like he was able to then go somewhere else and spot different trends, and then he came back to Apple and built it to where it is today, or helped build it to where it is today. And Apple wouldn't be where it is today without him being a rejection.
Which is crazy to just think of that. Yeah, exactly.
So if he would have kept saying, I'm going to keep doing it my way, and this is the way it is, it probably would have had some challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the more you study the lives of inspirational people, and that's what I'd say is everyone should pick their top 3 inspirational people and go and study their lives.
The full life,
Their full life.
Yeah.
And read the biography, the autobiography, listen to every podcast. I mean, like seriously get immersed in that person or the journey in the industry you're trying to make it in. And when you do that, you'll realize that your journey actually doesn't look that different from theirs.
Yeah.
It actually probably looks similar.
So how do we go inside our minds and say, okay, I'm getting rejected over and over again. I'm trying really hard. It's not working. How do we still deal with that emotional pain? Is it just the self-awareness that every great person had to go through this and this is just a timing thing? Like, how do we eventually just ease that? Or should we not try to ease that pain?
I don't think it's about easing it. I think it's about engaging it. You know, and I believe that the engaging does the easing, in my opinion, at least. So what I mean by that is behind that pain is a understanding that I don't have this skill.
Yes.
Or is an understanding of I didn't try hard enough. Or is an understanding of, oh, maybe there's just another option. Because guess what? Sometimes you may have done the best pitch in the world and you just had an executive that didn't like your vibe.
Keep going.
And
keep asking different people.
keep going. Like you know, you've just got to realize that you have to engage that pain in discovery. And that eases it because when you discover like for example, let's take my podcast. My podcast producer, the team that was meant to produce my podcast, pulled out 2 weeks before we launched my podcast. And I thought I had this big deal lined up. I was really excited. I'd never launched a podcast before. And I thought, oh yeah, this can be amazing. And I was in India meditating for my annual trip that I take. I come back and the first news I remember receiving is, by the way, this isn't happening anymore. And I'd set that I was going to launch my podcast on Valentine's Day 2019. And I had my episodes recorded with my wife, and I'd already gone out and made the content. So just to tee up how bad that 2-week notice was, I'd already gone to Monaco, interviewed Novak. I'd already interviewed Lily, I'd interviewed Russell Brand in London, I'd interviewed my wife, and obviously those people are all close friends and people I know, so they were very happy to be on the podcast even when it was new. So I'd already done all that effort, I'd already created all the content myself. All this podcast company was going to do was put it out there and help me market it a bit. And then they pull out 2 weeks before it comes out. And I'm going to myself, wow, okay, like I can either sit here and be really sad, or I can scrap together and figure it out. And so the only thing I realized was it actually turned out perfectly, because now I own my podcast
There you go.
and I'm completely aware of every part of the journey, and it gave me more confidence in myself that I could scrap together when I had to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is, that we lack confidence. We're waiting for someone else to tell us how we should feel about ourselves.
And I think if we go back to those 3 questions you said, like when you're feeling a failure over and over and over again, or you feel a sense of I'm not enough or whatever it may be, go back to asking those 3 questions to yourself. How can I be of service today or serve today? What can I love about myself? So even when everyone's saying no, what is there to love about me?
Correct.
To remind yourself and not be validated by other people's opinions.
Yeah.
And who do I want to be
Yeah.
that I can love?
Yes, exactly.
Like,
Who
and
do I
just-
need to become?
Who do I need to become that I
Yeah.
can love? And just keep focusing on the process, because the process is the prize.
Yes.
And focus on that journey.
Yes.
I'm curious about success then. You know, we've talked about how to deal with failure, but how do we deal with success? Because this is actually, when I ask most people, 50-50 of people are failure and success is their biggest fear. And some people say, why would you be afraid of success? But a lot of people are afraid to succeed because of the weight, the pressure. Can I maintain it? My family and friends aren't going to support me, and they're going to try to pull me back down, all this stuff. How do we deal with success? Because we're not taught this growing up. So
Yeah.
how do you think we should deal with it?
One of my favorite ways to deal with success is continue trying to be the least successful person in the room that you're in. I think there's those statements of like, you know, never
Always be the dumbest person
Yeah,
in the room,
never be
yeah.
the smartest person in the room, etc. And I think it's the same with, if you become successful, don't just stand at the top of the mountain, don't just stand at the top of the building, go back down the stairs and keep building and keep living as that person that got you there, because you only got there because you started from the bottom. Right, no one starts at the top, and so you started at the bottom and you built it up, and it was that mindset that you started with that got you there. And so you want to keep rediscovering that mindset and new parts of it, and new parts of that mindset too, where you're always trying to challenge yourself. And so for me, one of the best ways of dealing with success is keep expanding the goalposts, right? Keep widening the goalposts, keep making them harder to reach and challenging yourself, because when you challenge yourself and you push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're naturally humbled. Because you're naturally humbled when you're walking into spaces. I'm sure you feel this sometimes. Like, sometimes I walk into a room and I'm like, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Sitting on a table, I'm like, why should I be here?
yeah, like, and there's part of it that's imposter syndrome, and that can have its own negativity, but part of that just lets me feel like a beginner again.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that feeling, and I go, this is amazing, because of this, and I did it all myself, and I'm self-made. You start recognizing gratitude for all the people that got
Yeah.
you there. So for me in success, first thing is be grateful for all your teachers, mentors, guides, people that got you there. The second thing is always keep challenging yourself, because the more you're out of your comfort zone, the more naturally you stay humble. You don't stay humble by trying to be humble. You become humbled constantly by trying to do stuff that's out of your league, which constantly makes you prepare, work, deepen what you
Study,
have.
all that stuff.
All of that stuff that makes you go there again. And then the third thing you do with success is, I think you try and share it with others. You try and use your platforms as an opportunity to give other people a platform so that they can come up as well, because you're reminded of what a beautiful gift you have.
Yeah, and how the people supported you or gave you an opportunity or gave you an interview or something
Yeah, there
early on.
there was someone successful who had to give you something
Yeah,
in
a
the
piece
beginning.
of a wisdom.
Coming on your podcast,
Exactly.
giving you an insight.
quote or whatever, yeah.
or even rejecting you. Like,
Yeah.
even indirectly, someone had to do something.
That's true. You know, it's funny because I love this approach to having humility when you succeed. And I also think, let me know if you think I'm off here, I also feel like sometimes we get into a place where we're always putting it on other people. Like, it's not about me, it's about the team, it's about this. Like I see that a lot as well, where some people are more extreme, like I'm the man, and then other people are like, you know what, it wasn't me at all, it was God, it was the team, like I just showed up, you know? So I think there's a balance of, I love the speech that Snoop Dogg gave, where I think it was like on the Hollywood Walk of Fame,
When he got his star.
and he says like, I want to thank me for me. I want to thank me for all those late nights I put in, for all the hard work, for like overcoming the rejection. Like he went on this thing, and I want to thank me for like showing up.
Yeah.
And I think we also should acknowledge ourselves for, yes, people helped us.
For sure.
We got guidance. We had all this access, but Snoop Dogg still had to show up.
Yeah.
He still had to put in the hours and the time to
Yes.
make the results. And I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, is it good to also acknowledge ourselves for the work we put in, the wins, the things we do?
Yeah,
Or
for
is,
sure.
or is it all about being humble and acknowledging everything else?
I think it's about being honest.
Yeah.
It's honesty, right? Like humility means to be honest. It's like the ability to say, this is what this person deserves credit for, and this is what I deserve credit for, and this is what this person. It's like, it's kind of like when you write the acknowledgements of your book, right? You write. I mean, I remember doing that process and really thinking about like who's helped this book in different ways, and everyone gets their line in the acknowledgement who's made a difference. Now your name goes on the front cover because you wrote the book. Like you want everyone to receive the credit to the degree they merit it.
Yes.
And so you never want someone to feel like they didn't receive as much credit as they deserve. And at the same time, you don't want to give someone more credit than they deserve. The point of credit is to give it where credit's due.
Right.
And so for me, that's honesty, that's humility. Arrogance and pride is when you start to feel like only you did it on your own. And we all know that's just not true. Like, I can't say I did it all on my own. I can't anyway. I definitely can't say that. And I can't say it was all other people. And so that's where honesty and humility, I think, live together.
Yeah, acknowledging everything about it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, a lot of people haven't learned about how to deal with failure or success. And I don't think people have been trained how to believe in themselves. And for me, self-doubt is a big thing. I think it keeps people back from their dreams. And I'm curious, I'm going to share 5 words with you: beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, and intentions. How should we be thinking about beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, and intentions within our life? Because I think those 5 things dictate the results, the outcome, our feelings, all of this in our life based on beliefs, thoughts, words, actions, intentions. How should we be thinking about these things? How should we be speaking to help us build our self-confidence? What's your thoughts? I'm throwing a lot at you here, but...
No, let's go down each of them. So
Beliefs?
let's start with beliefs. So I think the first thing we have to do with beliefs is you have to realize everyone has them. It's not like you don't have beliefs just because you don't know what they are. Everyone has beliefs that they're currently living with. And I think life is about unlearning the beliefs you have and questioning the beliefs you have and then creating new ones. So the first thing I do with beliefs...
Unlearning.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
What if your parents had the answers and the way and the religion and this? Should we be questioning it all?
I think we should question it because questioning... questions are the most powerful invention in the world. Because questions either strengthen or weaken a belief based on the information. So questions aren't always from a place of doubt and cynicism and trying to find a weakness. Questions are a sincere request to figure out something. Like when we're sitting in these interviews, you're not sitting there trying to like be cynical or you want to help yourself and people who are listening and watching. And so that's a question, first of all. A question is not to catch someone off guard. A question is not to put someone down. A question is not to mislead people. A question is to uplift yourself and others. And when you ask a question in that way, the answer can either strengthen a belief you already have or weaken it or introduce you to a new one.
Why do we get so frustrated when our beliefs get questioned? When we have a belief that we put out in the world or we question someone's belief, why do people, when they get shaken in their beliefs, they attack, they break down, whatever? Why is that? Why don't people just say, okay, that's interesting, let me look at that more?
Yeah, because we've defined our identity by our beliefs. So imagine you're on one of these assault courses and you're on this rope and you're being told to swing to the next rope. But in order to catch the next rope, you need to let go of this rope. but you're scared because this rope is currently your safety. So your current belief is your safety. And when you have to consider holding on to another belief and to entertain both together, you're scared that if that one doesn't hold, I'm basically going to fall. So people are scared that their belief is currently their safety net. And so even if it's wrong, it still makes them feel safe and they feel comfortable, and we don't want to feel uncomfortable, so we'd rather hold on to that safety net, right? So the only way to do it...
So how do we get comfortable with questioning our beliefs, but not being like holding on to nothing?
Well, realizing that you don't have to change your mind, or you don't have to leave what you think in order to entertain or be curious about anything and explore. Like exploring, experimenting, and experiencing can either strengthen the belief you have or help you find a new one. But you have to do that middle 3 E's of exploring, experimenting, and experiencing.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we are just theoretically thinking. We're not experiencing the benefit.
And this is what I love about what you've done in your past. We've talked about this, how, you know, you grew up in a certain religion and then you started studying different religions to see, okay, let me just try this on and let me see what I like about this religion. And does that apply to, you know, can I let something go in what I grew up in? Not making anything right or wrong, but just saying what works for you.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think taking that experiential journey of asking questions from different beliefs allows you to just say, okay, yeah, this is working for me already. I don't need to change.
Exactly.
And I like this, and I'm going to keep growing and go from there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I desired for safety and security. So what you're speaking about was when I was around 16, maybe 15, we used to celebrate Christmas every year. And Christmas is probably my favorite time of year. We were talking about it. Like, I love listening to Christmas songs, and I love Christmas decoration. And for me, Christmas is
presents.
It's presents. And so I grew up in a culture where we celebrated Christmas, but Christmas was presents and a family dinner. And because I went to my school in England, we'd celebrate all the religious holidays. So we knew about all the main stories behind every major world religion. And so I remember celebrating Christmas at home, but thinking, I don't know that much about Jesus. And should I not be connecting with Jesus because that's why we even have this day? And so I started going to church in my local area just out of curiosity. I wasn't trying to be a Christian or trying to be a Hindu or trying to be anything. I was just interested and curious to be like, what is it about Christ that created a day that has lasted thousands of years that people all over the world celebrate? There must be something here. And so I feel like we get so scared because we want clear designations. We want like a clear title of I am this or I am that. And that gives us a sense of safety and security. But really answers come in the curiosity, not in the security.
Yeah.
Right?
What does that identity do to us, in a good way or in a negative way?
In a good way, it creates and this isn't just about religious identity, it's any identity.
Just
I'm
any
a podcaster
identity.
or whatever. Yeah, it's not about
holding
religion.
on to this identity of yourself.
Yeah. So in the good sense, it surrounds you with more people like that. So if I'm a podcaster, I hang out with more podcasters, we learn more about podcasting, and that's a great thing because we all become better podcasters. The mistake is I go, oh, I can only be a podcaster, but I can't write a book. I can't make a video. I can't do that now. And that's the mistake that it makes. So it should be evolving. These titles that we give ourselves, these communities should help us evolve, not devolve.
Yeah.
And not stop us from expanding and growing.
Okay.
And so you want to be around people that are always curious and insightful.
What did you notice about the outside world maybe a year or 2 years into the flow of your learning, you know, about yourself and about the wisdom and the philosophy of being a monk? What did you start to notice the most common things of when you were just talking to people or just walking down the street and just being aware of what was happening?
Absolutely. It's actually, I've been quoting the Gita a lot, the Bhagavad Gita, but I'll quote a modern day, I guess somewhat modern day philosopher because I think this encapsulated it perfectly. He said that, this is Cooley, a philosopher, writer, he said, today I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. Right? And I always feel that blows my mind every time I say it. I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. So we live in this perception of a perception of ourselves. So we've all seen the movie Inception. Imagine you get lost so far into someone's perception, and that's your perception. So if I think Lewis thinks Jay's good, then I feel good. But if I think Lewis thinks Jay's not good, then I don't feel good. And we live like that today. If I think someone thinks I'm confident, I feel confident. But if I think someone thinks I'm not confident, then I don't feel confident. And that's what I noticed when I lived as a monk, that people were so far removed from their own understanding of themselves that they were either lost living a life they didn't want to, lost living up to someone else's expectations, or lost becoming someone to impress someone else. And so people were their real identity is almost buried under 6 feet of multiple identities they've created. And that's what I started to notice. We have a social media identity, we have a LinkedIn identity, we have a Twitter identity, we have a Facebook identity. Then we have an identity we are to our boss. Then we have an identity we are with our Friday night friends. Then we have an identity we are to our Sunday people. And we've just created all of these identities. And if you ask people, who are you? We struggle to answer that question. And so as a monk, you're just taught to dig deeper beyond all those identities and kind of, again, bring out yourself rather than define yourself. So that was what I noticed. I just started to notice that people had a big lack of self-actualization. They were very disconnected from what they wanted, needed, and understood about themselves. And most people's identities were crafted by the reflection in this mirror of their mom, dad, friends, boss, partner, whatever it may be.
Right. How do we start to tap into self-realization better?
Yeah,
how do we learn that about ourselves?
So I think it starts even at a physical level. I'll give a basic example at a physical level. Anyone who's a physical fitness or a health coach will know that different bodies need different food, different sleep, different fluids. We don't all need the same thing. Me and you with different body types can't do the same workout. Right? We can't. I would die if I tried to lift what you lift. It just wouldn't work.
And I would die trying to sleep on the floor.
Right, exactly. No, but exactly, right? And that's the point. Our bodies have different tolerances in different things. That's self-awareness at the physical level already. So now what I realized by living as a monk is I can't survive off a 4-hour sleep a night. Like I realized that about my body.
When you were a monk?
Kind of when I was leaving and when I kind of came back to my real bed and I was just like, oh, I like this. This is, this is good. Right? And I kind of came to that realization that I'm not able to function as effectively as I want to. I could when I was a monk because we meditated so much.
That just got you to a higher vibration.
Exactly. So now I meditate 2 hours a day. Then I used to meditate 4-6 hours a day, plus the collective, plus the environment. All of that helps. So now that I don't have that, I can't. But if I have that, I can.
Could have just slept for those 4 hours and been better.
yeah, exactly. So the point I'm making is that's physical self-awareness. We know our limits, we know what we can do, we know what we can't do, we know what our challenge is. On a mental level, what's self-awareness? Knowing what type of people I like to be with. Knowing who helps me grow and who drains me. That's mental self-awareness. So self-awareness at every level, and then we go into the spiritual consciousness level. That's disconnecting from all these identities and understanding the identity that we are wired for generosity. And we're wired to serve. And only in service can we be happy. And that's us on a consciousness level. That's the identity of consciousness. Like water is wet, the sun is heating and light. Consciousness is service. Like that's how it fits.
Why are we wired for that?
We're wired for that because all of us as consciousness have been designed, and we see it since like even kids. Like I was giving this example of this beautiful, and you may have seen it. It went viral on Instagram. It was this little girl, probably about 2 years old, watching a cartoon, and she takes a handkerchief, and the cartoon character's crying, and she goes up to the television and she tries to wipe it off, right? And it's incredible because this girl's 2 years old, and she thinks this cartoon character animal's crying, and she gets a real tissue and tries to wipe it on the TV. Obviously, it doesn't work. And there's another one that I saw with this statue of this rabbit, and there's like 4 rabbits, and one rabbit's like falling off the end, and this little boy is trying to push the rabbit up, but it's a stone rabbit, it's just a statue, but he's trying to help it back up. So we see, and there was a great article in Wired about this, about how we're wired for generosity. Our brain is happier in service. Why are we that way? I'm not fully sure. But what I do know from my experience as a monk, or what I can verify, is that we've been created to connect and serve. Right? We've been created to connect and serve.
But you don't know why.
I can give you my opinion and the Vedic opinion. I can't tell you why for everyone.
Right.
The reason is the main deep or the main Vedic reason is that we've been created that way because that's our nature and that's what makes us most happy. Because this whole world is almost a school, an education system to make us realize that one truth. To make us realize that one truth. And we see that when we're serving, when we're doing that, we feel genuine happiness. But when we're trying to gain and greed and power and strength, we even feel empty as it slips through our fingers. So the why is because that allows us to connect to our deepest self, the happiest self that we have. And modern studies have shown that. So Michael Norton at Cambridge University, he did a study where they gave people $5, $10, $20 to spend on themselves. Have you seen this?
Go ahead though.
Yeah, and then they spent $5, $10, $20 on others. So people spent $5, $10, $20 on makeup, Starbucks, and the normal stuff, right? That was the three makeup, Starbucks, and then something else, I can't remember. And then people who spent on other people, they also bought the same stuff. Starbucks was still in there, and they're buying all this stuff. What they found is that when people self-assess their happiness before and after, without knowing about this A/B test, people who spent the money on themselves didn't feel any happier or any less happier. But the people that spent on others felt 10 to 20% happier. And then he went and tried this out. This was a college in the United States. They then went and did it in Africa. They did it all over the world. And the stats and the pattern showed the same.
Wow.
That we're wired for generosity. We're wired to serve. To make us realize that that's our real nature. That's our greatest self-awareness. Wow. Right? So that's the Vedic opinion. And that's why you had to probe me to go to why it is. I know why it is, but I want to give people an answer that I feel they can connect with.
So what was one of the greatest lessons you learned in those 3 years then?
Do you want me to share the one I shared before or share another one?
Share another one.
Yeah, okay, I'll share another one. This is probably one of my favorite things. And it's because this was what I learned on my first day of monk school. So if you think about what you learned on the first day of school when you were 3 or 4, if you remember what it was.
A, B, C, D.
Yeah, exactly. Alphabet, the numbers, right? 1 to 10, A, B, C, right? The 26 letters of the alphabet. So I remember my first day of monk school. I've just shaved my head. I'm now wearing robes. I still look like I'm from London, like I can't get away with it. I'm walking around and I notice this monk who's teaching. This monk's 10 years old and he's teaching a group of 5-year-old monks, right? And I see him teaching. He looks like an adult, like,
wow.
You know, his ability to like teach these 5-year-olds and conduct himself, and he's got this great aura about him. And so I'm kind of eavesdropping on his class. I can't obviously go and sit with a bunch of 5-year-olds, even though I really want to, because I'm like, I feel like a 5-year-old next to that 10-year-old. And I went up to him and I said, what are you doing? And he said, oh, well, we just taught their first class ever. And I said, oh, cool. And he said, well, what did you learn in your first class at school? And I said, oh, well, I learned the alphabet and numbers. And I said, well, what did they learn? He said, do you want to know what they learned on their first day of school? I said, yeah, of course. He said, the first thing that we teach them, the first thing you learn at monk school is learning how to breathe. I said, why? He said, because we're taught that the only thing that stays with you from the moment you're born to the moment you die is your breath. All your friends, family, the country you live in, all of that's going to change. Mm-hmm. The only thing that doesn't change, that stays with you from the moment you're born to the moment you die, is your breath. And he said, notice, when you get stressed, what changes? Your breath.
Right.
When you get angry, what changes? Your breath. When you're sad, what changes? Your breath. When you're happy, what changes? Your breath. Every emotion is experienced with the change of the breath. So he said, when you learn how to navigate and manage your breath, you can actually navigate any situation in life. And I was just blown away. I was just like, wow. And then I remember researching it and noticing how athletes were taught how to breathe, musicians, singers, especially those who play wind instruments, who have to reach really high notes. They're all trained how to breathe because they have to use their breath in challenging, stressful, pressure-filled situations. Right. But I was like, so are all of us. Mm-hmm. You've got to go on stage in front of 10,000 people. You've got to go to a concert. You just lost a deal or a contract. Our breath changes in all those scenarios, yet we don't know how to use our breath to change our life. Right. And so for me, that was a huge learning point where I just thought, wow, that's what you're taught. The priority is on the root of things, not the leaf of the symptoms.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing about living as a monk. You're not dealing with your challenges at symptomatic level. You're dealing with it at root level. Right? People say, oh, if you're stressed out, just take a stress pill. If you're stressed out, just go to get a massage. If you're stressed out, just relax, watch Netflix and chill. But all that's doing is pacifying you, escape for that hour, 2 hours, maybe a week. But going to the root of it and learning how to change your breath means you can manage any situation in life. And that principle, that's an example of the principle which is so much deeper, that always go to the root. It will take longer, but it will last longer. Right? If you go to the root, it takes longer, but it lasts longer. But if you go for the symptom, you get it quick and it
never lasts.
And it never lasts. And we don't know that.
Yeah.
So that was the deepest principle I learned as a monk. You always go to the root. Cut down the root of that weed in your heart. Cut down the root of that weed in your mind. Don't just let it grow and kind of water a little bit and snip, cut it a bit. Just really go to the root and just knock it out there. Just get rid of it. Get a big axe and cut it down.
Wow. Are there any weeds in your life right now?
Loads.
In your heart or in your mind?
Always. My daily practice is to refine my intention. The biggest weeds that we all get is on our intention. So when I say intention, I mean my current intention is to use everything I've been given, everything that I have in the service of others. So I want to use the following that I have to help people. I want to use the money that I have to help people. I want to use the network that I have to help people. But every day that intention, which is a beautiful little plant that's growing, gets weeds around it. No, do it for the money. I hear that voice, right?
Do it for the fame.
Just do it for the fame, do it for the followers, do it for this. All these weeds are like, go